Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Emmett Corrigan. Ashley Harmon was a vibrant and intelligent individual. However, her parents' divorce when she was 9 years old marked the beginning of a challenging period in her life. During this time, Ashley took on a maternal role, caring for and protecting her 5 siblings. Faith is the foundation of her life. As a devoted member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Ashley found strength and comfort in her relationship with God. Whenever she faced adversity, her faith provided her with the resilience to persevere. Ashley's unwavering commitment to her faith gave her the courage to overcome obstacles and difficult situations head-on. In 2003, while studying human development at Utah State, Ashley met Emmett Corgan, a philosophy student. Emmett, like Ashley, had experienced the pain of parental separation, having gone through a similar experience at the age of 10. He, too, found solace in the Mormon faith. Emmett was 17 years old when he was baptized into the Church of Jesus Christ and the Latter-day Saints, surrounded by his loved ones. Around that time, Ashley caught his eye, and he was immediately drawn to her intelligence. Emmett confided in his close friends that he was certain Ashley was the one he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. As their relationship blossomed, Emmett proposed to Ashley during the 2008 Christmas season, just a few months after they met. Overjoyed, Ashley said yes, and they began making wedding plans. The couple exchanged vows in a Mormon temple, a ceremony that reflected their shared values. Their marriage brought joy and stability to their lives. In the Mormon faith, marriage is deeply revered as a sacred and eternal bond between two people. Mormons believe that this bond transcends mortality, continuing even after death. Divorce is discouraged but allowed in exceptional cases. In 2005, Ashley and Emmett welcomed twin daughters, marking the beginning of their parenthood journey. They were ecstatic to take on their new roles. Emmett cherished every moment spent with the girls, embracing fatherhood. Ashley was thrilled to be living her dream life. While attending Utah State University, the couple managed to balance childcare and educational responsibilities. Despite challenges, their faith and love helped them overcome obstacles. They persevered, striving for a better future. By 2009, Emmett graduated with high honors, then attended law school and passed the bar exam. He pursued a career as an attorney. Meanwhile, Ashley focused on raising their growing family, dedicating herself to household management and childcare for their 4 children. The Corgan family appeared to have a perfect life to outsiders. They resided in a lovely home with multiple children, and Emmett had a rewarding career. However, their situation wasn't as ideal as it seemed. By August 2010, Emmett felt increasingly pressured to support his family financially, particularly with 4 young children under the age of 5. To solve this problem, he decided to start his own business, focusing on working as a criminal defense lawyer. A friend introduced Emmett to Candy Hall, a well-regarded paralegal with experience working for a criminal attorney. After a successful lunch meeting, Emmett hired Candy to work at his firm. At the time, Candy was married to Robert Hall, who was widely regarded as a devoted father and diligent worker. When Candy started working for Emmett Corgan, she was initially excited, and her family was happy for her. However, as time passed, Emmett's wife, Ashley, began to notice that their marriage was changing. Emmett was under a lot of stress. To cope with the stress, Emmett started spending more time at the gym, which became an addiction for him. He went to the gym regularly, leaving Ashley alone to take care of the children. Despite the growing distance between them, Ashley and Emmett welcomed their 5th child, a son, on January 15, 2011. However, Emmett's behavior changed even more after the birth of their son. He began spending more time away from home, sometimes staying out overnight. Ashley became concerned about Emmett's activities and confided in her sister that she feared he might be cheating on her. Meanwhile, Candy, Emmett's assistant, was also experiencing problems in her marriage. Her husband, Robert, was jealous of her working for a young and charismatic man like Emmett, which led to constant fighting and took a toll on their marriage. On March 6, 2011, Ashley and Emmett's 7th wedding anniversary had arrived, but Emmett was absent, claiming he had to attend a bodybuilding convention. Ashley was left alone with the children, feeling anxious about their marriage. She wondered if she was to blame for Emmett's unhappiness. Determined to improve things, she pushed on, as divorce wasn't an option. Ashley chose to address the issue directly. A few days later, on March 11th, she spent the entire day planning the perfect evening to reconnect with Emmett. She prepared his favorite meal, cleaned the house, and made sure the children behaved. At 6 p.m., Ashley had the table set, ready to greet him warmly. However, Emmett didn't arrive until 2 hours later. When Ashley approached him with a kiss, he turned away, further straining their relationship. Despite Emmett's cold demeanor and the growing distance between them, Ashley remained determined to rekindle their love. She believed their relationship was worth fighting for and was willing to do whatever it took to repair it. The family gathered around the table to eat. However, Emmett claimed he wasn't hungry, which was disappointing and hurtful to Ashley. As the rest of the family enjoyed their dinner, Emmett got up, saying he needed to go to Walgreens, but Ashley sensed something was wrong and asked him to stay. Emmett responded harshly and left, leaving Ashley feeling confused and hurt. Meanwhile, Emmett's assistant, Candy, was dealing with her own marital problems. Her husband, Robert, had decided to leave their home after their marriage reached a breaking point. Despite their love for each other, Robert believed it was best to start fresh and move on. That evening, Robert phoned his daughter to check if she was using Candy's car. She told him she isn't. A few minutes later, while driving past Walgreens, she spotted her mother's car in the parking lot. She didn't think much of it and immediately called her father to let him know. Robert responded casually with, "Oh, okay." Unbeknownst to them, this ordinary-sounding conversation would have a profound impact on two families' lives forever. Ashley lay in bed, overcome with worry about her marriage. Despite her frantic texts and calls, Emmett remained unreachable. A nagging feeling in her gut left her uneasy. Around 1 p.m., a 911 call reported gunshots and a screaming woman in a Walgreens parking lot, prompting a swift police response. Upon arrival, the first officer was met with a disturbing scene, a lifeless man on the ground and a wounded person clutching their head in pain. Police sought to speak with Candy Hall, who was present at the scene. She identified the wounded person as her husband, Robert, and the deceased as her boss, Emmett. Emmett had suffered fatal gunshot wounds to the head and chest. Shortly after his body was discovered, Ashley was awakened by a knock on the door from the police. Ashley was stunned and inconsolable, unable to comprehend the events that led to this tragedy. After the police informed Ashley of her husband's death, a detective inquired if she was familiar with Robert and Candy Hall. Ashley stated that she knew Candy as Emmett's assistant but suspected an affair between Candy and Emmett. The police took Candy Hall from the Walgreens parking lot for questioning to piece together the events leading to Emmett's death and Robert's head injury. During the interrogation, detectives asked Candy if she had a romantic relationship with her boss, Emmett. She denied it, also refuting any intimate encounters between them. Candy claimed she went to Walgreens that night to collect a prescription and coincidentally met Emmett. After that, she and Emmett decided to take a drive. While driving to a gas station, Candy received a call from her estranged husband, Robert. She told him she was with Emmett, which led to Robert expressing jealousy and making a threat against Emmett. Candy and Emmett arrived at Walgreens after what felt like an eternity. As they stepped out of the car, Candy saw Robert standing at the entrance. He looked visibly angry. An intense argument broke out between Robert and Emmett, leading to a physical fight. Then, 3 shots were fired, and both men fell to the ground. Candy saw the gun, picked it up, and threw it aside. When questioned by detectives, Candy claimed she didn't know who fired first. After Robert received treatment for his superficial gunshot wound, detectives interviewed him. They told Robert they found a gun at the scene and asked him who it belonged to. Robert admitted the gun was his and explained that it fell from his pocket during the fight with Emmett in the parking lot. Robert alleged that Emmett dove for the gun, triggering a struggle, and Emmett shot him in the head. However, Robert couldn't recall who shot Emmett during the struggle. Given Robert's head wound, detectives weren't surprised by his hazy memory. Nevertheless, they wondered if Emmett was indeed the one who fired first, considering he was the one who ended up dead. To investigate the shooting in the Walgreens parking lot, detectives reviewed the security footage. At 9:55 p.m., Robert Hall arrived in the parking lot. A minute later, he entered the Walgreens store and quickly moved through each aisle, appearing to look for someone. He left the store at 10:06 p.m. and parked his car next to Candy's, waiting there for a few minutes. About 10 minutes later, Emmett's truck entered the parking lot. However, the actual shooting was not captured on camera. Candy, Emmett's assistant, initially denied being in a romantic relationship with Emmett. However, their co-workers suspected otherwise. Co-workers reported seeing Candy and Emmett spending a lot of time together in Emmett's office with the door closed. 3 weeks after Candy was hired, on the day Emmett was shot, detectives discovered that Emmett had accompanied Candy to the public defender's office to discuss her divorce from Robert. During the investigation into Emmett's murder, crime scene investigators searched Emmett's vehicle and found steroids in the glove compartment. This discovery didn't surprise Emmett's loved ones. When Candy gave her statement, she described a shot cadence that led detectives to believe Robert shot Emmett twice before shooting himself in the head. Based on this evidence, detectives obtained an arrest warrant for Robert Hall, charging him with first-degree murder. Robert Hall was arrested and charged with Emmett's murder. The consequences of Robert Hall's actions were severe, with a possible conviction of first-degree murder carrying a sentence of either life in prison without parole or the death penalty. Prosecutors argued that Robert Hall was driven by anger towards Emmett, who had been having an affair with Robert's wife, Candy. They alleged that this anger led Robert to shoot Emmett and then attempt to take his own life. In contrast, Robert's defense team presented a different scenario. They claimed that Emmett, who had a history of steroid abuse, was the aggressor on the night of his death. According to the defense, Emmett managed to get hold of Robert's gun during the altercation and shot Robert first. Robert then regained control of the gun and killed Emmett in self-defense. Candy Hall, Robert's wife, was a key witness in the trial. Her testimony differed slightly from her initial statement to the police. On the witness stand, Candy described hearing a single pop, followed by 2 rapid pops, rather than the initial 2 shots and then a third. This revised testimony supported the defense's argument that Emmett had shot Robert first, and that Robert had then shot Emmett twice, resulting in his death. To prove that Robert was the shooter in the Walgreens parking lot, prosecutors presented forensic evidence about the type of weapon used. This evidence showed that the weapon accumulates a large amount of gunshot residue, GSR, after being fired. After the shooting, investigators tested Robert and Emmett for gunshot residue. The test found 32 gunshot residue particles on Robert's left palm and 23 on his right. In contrast, Emmett had only 1 particle on his left hand and none on his right. These results strongly suggested that Robert fired the gun, not Emmett. After a thorough review, the jury delivered a verdict of not guilty of first-degree murder for Robert Hall. However, They unanimously agreed that he was guilty of second-degree murder, indicating that the murder was not premeditated. As a result, Robert was sentenced to 30 years in prison by the presiding judge. He will be eligible for parole in 2028 at the age of 58. Despite being convicted, Robert has consistently maintained his innocence and appealed the verdict. In 2021, the Idaho Supreme Court reaffirmed his conviction, denying his request for a retrial. Ashley struggled to cope with the fact that her husband, Emmett, was murdered by the husband of his lover, Candy Hall. In a 2015 Dr. Phil interview, Ashley met Candy face-to-face for the first time. Despite the emotional pain, Ashley was determined to move forward. She closed the book on her old life and started anew by moving out of the town where she and Emmett raised their 5 children. As time passed, the children adjusted to the change and started to find happiness again. Ashley eventually remarried and had 2 more children. She currently blogs to support trauma victims. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Liga Scromane. Liga Scromane was born in 1986 in Latvia, where she grew up in a close-knit family with an older brother and a younger sister. She later moved to Ireland but remained close to her family. It was there that she met her future husband, Andrew Jordan. Despite struggling to connect with new people, the couple married 5 years later and shared big plans for their future. Liga worked at a hotel and lived modestly, but dreamed of opening a yoga retreat center in Portugal. Andrew supported her idea, and they saved money for 4 years to make it a reality. In early 2018, Liga was suffering from a severe skin condition that was affecting her physical and mental well-being. Her sister Ilse invited her on a trip to help her overcome this condition and regain her emotional balance. In February 2018, Liga and Ilse traveled to Thiruvananthapuram, the capital of Kerala, India, where Liga could receive Ayurvedic treatment for depression. Ayurveda, recognized by the World Health Organization since 1985 as one of the most effective alternative medicine systems, offered a promising solution for Liga's health issues. It's important to note that Ayurveda is not a cure-all, but rather a complementary approach to achieving healthy longevity. Liga, 33, and her sister Ilse traveled to Kerala seeking spiritual growth and relief from depression at an Ayurveda center. Their 6-week treatment plan included yoga, meditation, herbal remedies, and personalized nutrition and massage guidance. On March 14th, Liga skipped a yoga class, citing a headache. When Ilse returned to their room, Liga was gone. With the hotel staff's help, Ilse discovered that Liga had left the hotel at 11:30 a.m. in casual clothing, taking an auto rickshaw to Kovalam Beach for a walk. However, Liga was nowhere to be found on the beach, despite Ilse's thorough search until nightfall. Ilse reported her sister's disappearance to the police, but they showed little concern, believing Liga would either be found or return on her own the next day. Although they registered a case, the investigation was sluggish, effectively stalled from the start. Ilse took her sister Liga on a trip to India to share with her the country she loved so deeply. Tragically, the trip took a devastating turn. When the Indian police failed to take action for several days, Ilse decided to take matters into her own hands and began searching for Liga. She received support from friends and also informed her husband Andrew about Liga's disappearance, prompting him to fly to India immediately. After Liga went missing, her husband Andrew Jordan and sister Ilse launched a campaign to find her, reaching out to the local press and creating an online appeal. Ilse also tweeted to India's Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj, pleading for help and offering a 100,000 rupee reward to anyone with information about Liga's disappearance. Ilse and her friend Alexa, who had flown to India to help with the search, put up posters and distributed flyers in the Kovalam Beach area, where Liga was last seen. Many locals joined the search efforts. However, it's important to note that Liga struggled with depression and found it difficult to interact with strangers. On the day she vanished, she took an auto rickshaw to the beach and was never seen again. At the time, she had about 3,000 rupees with her, but no passport, which meant she couldn't leave the country. Ashok Kumar, the head of the local police station, claimed that they had no leads in Liga's disappearance. Initially, the police believed she might have gone on a drinking binge or eloped and would eventually return on her own. However, persistent requests for help from Ilse and Andrew prompted the police to launch a search operation in the Kovalam beach area where Liga was last seen. Although a woman's body was found washed ashore in Kanyakumari district, it was not identified as Liga's. Andrew suspected that Liga had been kidnapped by local gangs to be sold, and he attempted to infiltrate these gangs to gather more information. However, he was exposed and warned that if he continued to contact the gangs, he would have to leave the country. A month after Liga's disappearance, there were still no leads to her whereabouts. Ilse continued to search for her sister, visiting Kovalam Beach daily and observing people. She developed a theory that the only way to leave the beach unnoticed was by boat. Andrew returned to India on April 17, 2018, and joined Ilse in a new effort to find Liga, but her body remained unfound. The search for Liga was made more challenging due to her being a tourist and a citizen of another country. The Latvian Foreign Ministry maintained close contact with Liga's family and collaborated with the Indian authorities throughout the search process. The Latvian embassy also reached out to the Indian Foreign Ministry for special assistance in finding Liga. Additionally, the honorary consul of Latvia in India, whose jurisdiction includes the region where Liga went missing, was involved in the search efforts. At the request of the Coral State government, the Indian Navy and Air Force participated in the search operation. The search effort was extensive, utilizing an AN-32 transport plane, Gemini inflatable boats, underwater sonar, and 5 deep-sea divers. Unfortunately, despite these efforts, Liga remained missing and the desired outcome was not achieved. By this point, everyone in the local community was aware of the missing tourist from Latvia and was supporting and sympathizing with Andrew and Ilse. On April 20, 2018, Ela received the most awaited yet devastating call of her life. A body had been found in the mangrove jungle. She and Andrew rushed to the designated spot where the police were waiting to take them to the scene by boat. Elsa's heart was racing as she felt the overwhelming horror of the situation. As they arrived, Elsa was met with a gruesome sight. She recognized her sister's clothes, including the shirt and leggings, on the body. However, the jacket and shoes did not belong to Liga. It remained a mystery how Liga had ended up in this remote location, accessible only by going through Panatur from Samudra Beach. 2 women came forward, confirming that they had seen Liga traveling alone into the mangrove forest. But the question remained, why would a girl struggling with depression, already alone, take a boat to such a remote and inaccessible place in the forest? The body was taken to the medical college hospital for an autopsy, which was recorded on video. The police stated that they couldn't confirm the identity of the body until DNA analysis was complete. According to the city police commissioner, the body was severely mutilated, with the head found nearby. Although the police have tentatively identified the deceased as Liga, a missing tourist, they need DNA confirmation. Supporting the investigators' conclusion is the fact that Liga's relatives identified the victim by her hair and clothes. One possible theory, according to India's rescue services, is that Liga might have been poisoned by accidentally or intentionally eating the fruit of poisonous pong trees found in the mangrove forest. Between 1989 and 1999, over 500 people died from poisoning by these fruits in Kerala alone. The idea initially seemed absurd, given the body was found hanging upside down, without a head. However, if Liga had been poisoned, her body would likely have been in a different position, and her head would have been in place. Indian authorities were spouting absurdities based on misinformation about Liga's complex psychological issues. The investigators also considered the possibility that Liga had willingly abandoned her life. Ilse was concerned that the police would try to cover up her sister's murder by claiming she had voluntarily ended her life, despite the presence of a rope at the scene, which suggested the hiker had hanged herself. Elsa demanded a credible explanation for the missing head, and Ilse sarcastically retorted, "Don't tell me it's just lost." Here are the forensic test results that Ilse and the public were waiting for. The evidence is overwhelming. The autopsy reveals that Liga Skoma was strangled to death by multiple people during a violent attack. There were blood pools in her brain, bruising on her neck, and external injuries on her body, likely sustained during the struggle. Although the body was decomposing, the characteristic injuries on her throat cartilage indicate that someone forcefully squeezed her throat. The trauma was severe and fatal. Blood clots in her brain confirm strangulation, and bruises were found on her neck and legs, with a total of 9 wounds recorded on her body. Based on the autopsy results, the police no longer consider Liga's death to be voluntary. Instead, they believe she was murdered after putting up a struggle. Ilse, Liga's sister, felt a sense of relief that the police were now taking the case seriously and hoped they would soon find the killers. As part of their investigation, the police started questioning local drug dealers and card players. They also spoke to local residents, 2 of whom reported seeing Liga walking alone to the area where her body was later discovered. However, the police had doubts about the credibility of these eyewitnesses. Liga's family has criticized the Indian police, accusing them of incompetence. They believe that if the police had launched a search for Liga immediately, the tragedy might have been prevented. The 33-year-old Latvian tourist is thought to have been kidnapped from a nearby beach, taken by boat, and then strangled. A special team of investigators has been formed to find those responsible for the crime. So far, around 40 suspects have been questioned, and arrests are expected to be made in the coming days once the authorities have gathered sufficient evidence. The Indian police conducted an investigation that led to the arrest of 2 men who were accused of murdering Liga Skron. According to the police, Liga Skron was lured by the 2 men, who then subjected her to physical abuse before dismembering her body. The 2 alleged assailants, now in custody, were local dealers of illegal substances. Both suspects, who were also pimps, fully confessed to the crime while under interrogation. However, the autopsy did not provide much evidence due to the advanced state of decomposition of Liga Skron's body. Andrew Jordan filed a petition in Superior Court to review a felony murder case, suspecting that more people were involved in the woman's murder. He noted that both defendants had recanted their guilty pleas, suggesting that they may have confessed due to torture, a common practice in India. However, the Supreme Court of India denied the murdered woman's common-law husband a review of the case, citing a lack of direct evidence. Andrew was outraged when the trial was postponed for 2 months. He had previously accused the authorities and police of incompetence and attempting to cover up the murder to avoid scaring off tourists. The suspect's lawyers requested and received a postponement, which they are legally entitled to do once without providing a reason. Andrew believed that the more the case was delayed, the more likely it was that the investigation was flawed. Despite his concerns, both suspects remained in custody. An investigation into Liga Skron's murder revealed that 2 men, Umesh, 32, and Udayakumar, 28, offered her drugs, specifically Ligaskani weed, and then strangled and decapitated her after she was incapacitated. The 2 suspects were arrested and found to have a history of committing similar crimes on multiple occasions. They worked for a food delivery company in Kerala's capital city and moonlighted as illegal tour guides. Umesh and Udayakumar have been charged with multiple crimes, including destruction of evidence, murder, poisoning, kidnapping, and rape. The location where Liga's body was discovered had previously been used by Umesh as a meeting spot for his male clients. He has a long history of criminal activity, with 13 cases filed against him, including 6 for sexual assault and 1 for attempted murder. Several of Umesh's victims have come forward to testify against him. Multiple witnesses reported seeing Liga with the two men in the area. Initially, they denied any involvement, but after Liga's body was found, they confessed to the murder, which was committed during an act of violence. The suspects were arrested, but initially claimed they only saw Liga in Kovalam. After repeated questioning, they eventually pleaded guilty. On December 6, 2022, the court sentenced the two men to life in prison and ordered them to pay 65,000 rupees each in compensation to Ilsa, Liga's sister. India has seen a surge in violent crimes against young girls, with a high number of sexual offenses committed against minors. In response, the government has introduced the death penalty to address the acute problem of crime in the country. The persistence of Liga's relatives, particularly her sister, and the involvement of the press and an influential MP were crucial in ensuring the case was thoroughly investigated. Initially, the local police were not taking the case seriously, suggesting that Liga may have voluntarily disappeared. This is not an isolated incident in this area, where similar cases have occurred before, where the boundaries between love and horror, between compassion and betrayal, become increasingly blurred. We are confronted with a story that captures global attention. This is the tale of Jenna Oakley, a young woman whose life has descended into a haunting nightmare, entwined with passions, revenge, and sinister secrets. Through the eyes of those who have grappled with the dichotomy of good and evil, faith and betrayal, we delve into a narrative that prompts contemplation about the very essence of the human soul and the values that guide our decisions. Despite efforts by Jenna's legal team to argue for her confinement in a juvenile facility, Judge Darren Peckler decreed that she should face the consequences of her actions in an adult prison. As the verdict was delivered, the judge condemned the cruelty and senselessness of the crime against Rhonda, Jenna's stepmother. While Jenna was convicted, her father, Philip Oakley, remained plagued by questions about his daughter's motivations. Dissatisfied with the sentencing, Philip believed Jenna deserved a harsher punishment, lamenting the fact that she would only serve 15 years, while he, her brother, and Rhonda's children would endure a lifetime of pain and loss. But who was Jenna Oakley, and what drove an ordinary girl to commit such a heinous act, becoming enmeshed in a tale of tragedy? Let us delve into the depths of her soul together, seeking to unravel the motives behind her actions and grasp the true essence of this enigmatic personality. Jenna's upbringing was marked by hardship and neglect. Left alone at home from a young age, her mother's inability to provide a stable life left Jenna and her brother David vulnerable. The departure of her older stepsister, who had served as their guardian, further compounded their struggles. The neglect they endured was so severe that intervention by Child Protective Services became necessary, ultimately leading to their removal from their mother's care. In April of 2016, Jenna and David made the pivotal decision to move in with their father and his wife, Rhonda, a woman of 52 years at the time. Rhonda, from the outset, embraced her role as a stepmother wholeheartedly, treating her husband's children as her own. Those close to Rhonda and her husband later recounted how she had longed to be a nurturing presence in her stepchildren's lives, welcoming them into her home with warmth and sincerity. Little did anyone suspect that this seemingly ordinary transition would culminate in a harrowing tragedy. Despite Jenna's academic achievements and the praise she received from her teachers, she grappled with inner turmoil. Her rebellious nature made it challenging for her to adhere to the rules imposed in her new household. However, the situation escalated further when Jenna's parents discovered her relationship with a 20-year-old man named Kenneth, a connection that had roots dating back to Jenna's childhood in Indiana. As Jenna navigated the complexities of her adolescence, one enigmatic figure loomed large in her life: Rhonda, her stepmother. While ostensibly a pillar of support and protection, Rhonda's influence on Jenna's life would ultimately be shrouded in darkness. Delving into Rhonda's story becomes essential to unraveling the mysteries of her personality and understanding the profound impact she had on Jenna's life. Rhonda Raines Oakley, born on March 5, 1964, in Kent, USA, Casey County, emerged into the world as the daughter of Howard Lee Raines and Mabel Walls Raines. Her journey through life saw her graduate from Casey County High School in 1982, embarking on a 3-decade-long career in a renowned company specializing in marketing, packaging, and printing services. Described by her peers as a beacon of kindness and joy, Rhonda's warmth endeared her to many. Prior to her encounter with Philip Oakley, Rhonda had traversed the trials of divorce and motherhood, already a mother of 4 from a previous marriage. Fate intervened when Rhonda and Philip crossed paths on the golf course, igniting a whirlwind romance that led them to tie the knot. Despite their shared affection, the stark age difference between Rhonda and Philip raised eyebrows, prompting familial objections. Concerned about Jenna's involvement with Kenneth, who was 5 years her senior, Philip and Rhonda embarked on a mission to quell their daughter's infatuation. Rules were imposed, including the confiscation of Jenna's electronic devices and stern demands for compliance. However, Jenna's defiance only intensified, her clandestine rendezvous with Kenneth fueling a growing animosity towards her parents. On the fateful afternoon of September 1, 2016, as the golden hues of dusk began to descend, a grim discovery unfolded within the Oakley household. David, Jenna's younger brother, returned home from school, unaware of the tragedy that awaited him. As he stepped through the threshold and into the familiar confines of their home, an eerie silence hung heavy in the air, punctuated only by the distant barking of their family pets echoing from the basement below. Curiosity mingled with apprehension. David ventured into the basement, where the source of the canine distress awaited. What he encountered in that dimly lit space would haunt him forever. There, sprawled upon the cold concrete floor, lay Rhonda, his stepmother, her form unnaturally still, an aura of foreboding enveloping her motionless figure. Shock and panic gripped David's heart as he rushed outside, his frantic footsteps echoing through the quiet suburban streets. With trembling hands, he sought aid from their neighbors, his voice a desperate plea for help in the face of unspeakable horror. Emergency services descended upon the scene, their presence a beacon of hope in the darkness that had descended upon the Oakley household. Yet, despite their valiant efforts, Rhonda's fate had been sealed in bloodshed. The grim reality of her demise painted a chilling picture of brutality, her life extinguished by the cruel hand of violence. As investigators delved into the heart of the matter, the sinister truth began to unfurl like a macabre tapestry. What initially appeared as a botched robbery soon revealed itself to be a tangled web of deceit and betrayal. Amidst the chaos of the crime scene, the absence of Rhonda's car and the ominous discovery of a discarded cleaver hinted at a calculated act of malice, orchestrated with chilling precision. Upon Philip's return home, he was immediately met with the piercing scrutiny of detectives, their questions probing the depths of his shattered reality. With a heavy heart, he recounted the events of that fateful day. Each word a painful reminder of the chaos that had unfolded within the sanctity of their home. As he spoke, a gnawing sense of dread gripped him, tendrils of uncertainty weaving their way into his consciousness. The realization that his daughter, Jenna, had been conspicuously absent from the fabric of their lives on that tragic day only served to deepen the shadow of suspicion that loomed over their fractured existence. In the midst of his interrogation, Philip found himself grappling with the weight of unanswered questions, each more ominous than the last. Did Jenna's inexplicable absence herald a darker truth, a sinister plot veiled beneath layers of deceit? The very thought sent shivers down his spine, a stark reminder of the fragility of their fractured reality. With a heavy heart and trembling voice, Philip disclosed the tumultuous relationship between Jenna and Kenneth, a young man whose presence had cast a pall over their once tranquil home. He recounted his desperate attempts to intervene, to shield his daughter from the perils of forbidden love, each plea falling upon deaf ears. Yet, even amidst the chaos of his shattered existence, Philip clung to the fragile hope that his daughter's innocence remained untainted, that beneath the veneer of suspicion lay a truth yet to be revealed. And so, with bated breath and weary resolve, he entrusted the weight of his fears to the vigilant gaze of law enforcement, their pursuit of justice a beacon of hope amidst the darkness that threatened to consume them all. Evidence pieced together by investigators revealed a chilling sequence of events leading up to the tragic incident. At 3 a.m. on August 31st, the day preceding the harrowing event, Kenneth embarked on a journey from Indiana to Lexington, Kentucky, his destination set firmly on the Oakley residence. Surveillance footage from a Denver store manager corroborated this, capturing Jenna and Kenneth's presence on September 1st. The footage depicted them entering the establishment and subsequently departing, seemingly in the direction of a vehicle resembling Rhonda's stolen car. Jenna's demeanor in the footage was unsettlingly composed, devoid of any outward signs of duress. This revelation prompted investigators to pivot their focus away from the notion of a forcible abduction, instead entertaining the unsettling possibility of Jenna's direct involvement in her stepmother's demise. Subsequent searches of Jenna's personal effects unearthed a chilling narrative within the pages of her diary, a narrative dripping with venomous hatred and a chilling resolve. In its pages, Jenna's innermost thoughts and desires were laid bare, revealing a festering resentment toward her family and a steadfast devotion to Kenneth, despite her earlier assurances of compliance with her parents' wishes. With meticulous detail, Jenna outlined her sinister plan to obliterate her family unit, driven by an obsessive desire to preserve her forbidden love at any cost. Her father was slated as the first victim, the designated hour of his demise meticulously plotted between 4 and 5 a.m. Armed with a knife, Jenna intended to lure him to the basement before delivering the fatal blow. Rhonda, her stepmother, was next in line, her fate sealed within the confines of Jenna's twisted imagination. Between 6 and 8 a.m., Jenna planned to invade Rhonda's sanctuary, silencing her forever with the same instrument of death wielded against her father. David, Jenna's unsuspecting brother, occupied the final slot in her macabre symphony of destruction. In the somber confines of his own room, he would meet his untimely end, victim to the machinations of a sister consumed by darkness. As Philip grappled with the horrifying reality laid bare in Jenna's diary, the weight of his daughter's malevolence bore down upon him, shattering the fragile facade of familial harmony beyond repair. In Jenna's meticulously orchestrated plan, he found himself confronted with the unthinkable, the knowledge that his daughter was capable of unspeakable atrocities, her innocence forever lost to the abyss of her own twisted desires. At the onset of the investigation, a damning piece of evidence emerged, thrusting Jenna into the unforgiving glare of suspicion. Philip wasted no time in providing the authorities with Kenneth's contact details, a crucial step in the relentless pursuit of justice. With unwavering determination, law enforcement agencies swiftly tracked the fugitives to their hideout, culminating in a dramatic showdown on September 4th, just 3 days after the heinous crime had been perpetrated. In the quiet streets of Tucumcari, New Mexico, authorities closed in on their quarry, discovering Rhonda's stolen car parked ominously near the hotel where Jenna and Kenneth sought refuge. With precision and resolve, officers apprehended the pair, swiftly escorting them to separate vehicles, bound for a detention facility in New Mexico pending extradition. As the investigation intensified, authorities scoured the confines of the vehicle in search of the weapon wielded in Rhonda's brutal attack. Yet their efforts yielded nothing but frustration. Meanwhile, Kenneth, in a desperate bid to shield Jenna from the full weight of culpability, penned a chilling missive before attempting to end his own life. The ghastly tableau of his self-inflicted demise sent shockwaves through the detention center, leaving Kenneth teetering on the precipice of mortality. In the wake of this harrowing revelation, authorities made the conscious decision to shield Jenna from the grim reality unfolding within the confines of her co-conspirator's cell. With painstaking care, they orchestrated her return to Kentucky, their intent clear: to spare her the burden of knowledge until such time as she could offer her own testimony. For Jenna, shrouded in the pall of uncertainty, the journey back to her home state would be fraught with trepidation, each passing mile a reminder of the tumultuous path that lay ahead. Jenna's admission to the authorities laid bare the chilling reality of her involvement in the crime, as she recounted the grim sequence of events with a heavy heart. In her confession, she unraveled the haunting narrative of the fateful night, painting a picture of tragic inevitability. According to Jenna's harrowing testimony, the eve of the crime bore witness to Kenneth's clandestine visit to her home, a clandestine rendezvous that would shroud the dawn in darkness and alter the course of countless lives. As the day unfolded, their illicit tryst unfolded against the backdrop of unsuspecting bliss, oblivious to the storm gathering on the horizon. The tranquility of the day was shattered when Rhonda returned home, unwittingly stumbling upon the clandestine affair brewing in the shadows of her own abode. A confrontation ensued, escalating from heated words to the chilling embrace of violence. In a moment of unfathomable rage, Jenna's hands found purchase around Rhonda's throat, a desperate bid for control that would prove futile in the face of her lover's intervention. With a sickening inevitability, Kenneth stepped forward, a dark harbinger of finality as he seized Rhonda in a grip that defied mercy. The room bore witness to the cruel symphony of violence, the echoes of struggle drowned out by the cold steel of a kitchen blade. In the deafening silence that followed, Rhonda lay motionless, her life extinguished by the callous hands of her own kin. In the aftermath of the heinous act, Kenneth's fragile resolve faltered, his stomach lurching in revulsion at the sight of his own depravity. Vomiting into the void, he grappled with the weight of their transgression, a grim testament to the depths of human depravity. When pressed by authorities regarding the whereabouts of the murder weapon, Jenna's response offered little solace, her words a chilling testament to the calculated nature of their flight. With steely resolve, she recounted their hasty disposal of the incriminating evidence, a macabre ritual enacted in the shadow of their impending doom. As Jenna recounted her tale, her lover lingered on the precipice of life and death, his mortal coil tethered to the fleeting tendrils of existence. Yet, fate would not afford him the opportunity to atone for his sins, for the specter of mortality loomed large over his hospital bed. In the cold embrace of October's twilight, Kenneth breathed his last, leaving behind a legacy marred by tragedy and unfulfilled promise. Following the formalities of the court, Jenna found herself facing the weight of justice, her fate entwined with the tendrils of guilt and accusation. The charges levied against her bore testament to the severity of her transgressions, branding her as the architect of her stepmother's demise and a perpetrator of theft. Held without reprieve in the confines of a juvenile detention center, Jenna awaited her trial with a heavy heart, her thoughts haunted by the specter of her own culpability. As the gravity of her situation sank in, her father, once a pillar of familial devotion, turned his back on her, his words a damning indictment of her actions. Gone was the paternal instinct to protect, replaced instead by a grim resolve to see justice served. The news of Kenneth's demise, a grim epilogue to their shared tragedy, was withheld from Jenna until the day of her court hearing. The revelation struck her with the force of a sledgehammer, her world crumbling around her as she grappled with the enormity of her loss. In the hallowed halls of justice, her anguished cries reverberated, a stark reminder of the human cost of her actions. In a bid for clemency, Jenna pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter, her admission a frail echo of remorse in the face of overwhelming guilt. Yet, even as she sought redemption, her father's disillusionment loomed large, his cries for systemic reform falling on deaf ears. For Philip, the scars of his family's tragedy ran deep, a testament to the failings of a system ill-equipped to protect its most vulnerable. As the sentencing hearing drew near, Susan Hooper, a beacon of hope amidst the storm of legal proceedings, sought to unravel the tangled web of Jenna's tumultuous upbringing. In her impassioned plea for leniency, she painted a portrait of a girl besieged by a lifetime of abuse and neglect, a victim of circumstance driven to desperate measures by forces beyond her control. As the gavel fell and Jenna's fate was sealed, the echoes of her turbulent past reverberated through the hallowed halls of justice, a haunting reminder of the fragility of the human spirit in the face of insurmountable odds. Despite Jenna's pristine record devoid of any criminal blemish, the perplexing nature of her drastic actions left many scratching their heads in bewilderment. How could a girl so esteemed by her educators and peers stoop to such depths of desperation without a discernible cause? The absence of her family during the trial only added fuel to the fire of speculation, with Philip's refusal to participate and Jenna's mother's conspicuous absence casting a shadow of doubt over their parental obligations. Delving deeper into Jenna's tumultuous past, Susan unearthed a trail of abandonment and neglect that painted a stark picture of maternal indifference. Drawing from a trove of evidence and records, she pieced together the fractured narrative of Jenna's early years, revealing a childhood marred by the absence of maternal guidance and care. Susan's exhaustive investigation traversed state lines, scouring through the annals of child welfare services and medical archives in Indiana and Kentucky alike. Her efforts culminated in a tapestry of testimonies woven together from the threads of Jenna's past acquaintances and confidants. Among them stood Jenna's older half-sister, a reluctant witness whose recollections shed light on the harrowing reality of their shared upbringing. Recounting years of instability and insecurity, she laid bare the truth of their fractured family dynamic, where safety and solace were but distant dreams. As Susan peeled back the layers of Jenna's past, a chilling portrait emerged of a home haunted by the specter of crime and betrayal. Jenna's tender years were marked by the malevolent presence of her mother's ill-fated romance, a dalliance with an ex-convict that plunged their household into a maelstrom of chaos and fear. From the tender age of 3, Jenna bore witness to a procession of theft and infidelity, her innocence shattered by the tumult of her mother's misguided affections. All of these events unfolded before Jenna and her younger brother. It started with a concerned neighbor's call to Child Protective Services upon discovering rats in Jenna's family home. Beyond the rodent issue, the neighbor expressed worry about the children being left unattended for extended periods. Records from social workers' visits painted a grim picture of Jenna's home life. Jenna's mother's hostility toward social workers hindered their access, but when they finally entered, they were met with appalling conditions. Rotten food, piles of garbage, and rat droppings littered the house. Children were found relieving themselves on the floor amidst the squalor. The kitchen was a breeding ground for mold, with unwashed dishes stacked for months. Insects and rodents roamed freely, posing serious health hazards. Compounding the danger, children had unrestricted access to medicines and other harmful substances. Despite efforts to improve the situation by relocating Jenna and her brother to live with their father in Kentucky, conditions did not ameliorate. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Chad Dorman. Chad Dorman, a 32-year-old resident of Claremont County, Ohio, was married to 34-year-old Laura. Together, they had a blended family consisting of Laura's 16-year-old teenage daughter, Alexis, from a previous relationship, and their 3 young sons, Hunter, Clayton, and Chase, aged 3, 4, and 7, respectively. The 3 boys were inseparable, shared a love for sports, and were known for their humorous and affectionate nature. Laura was a stay-at-home mom, while Chad worked to provide for the family. They resided in a modest 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house in New Richmond, a small town of approximately 2,000 people situated along the Ohio River in Claremont County. Until tragedy struck, they lived an ordinary and unassuming life. On June 15, 2023, Chad returned home from work earlier than usual and decided to take a nap with his family. He invited his wife Laura and their 3 sons to join him in their bedroom, where they all sat together, laughing and chatting. Unbeknownst to Laura, this loving moment was about to turn into a nightmare. After a few minutes, Chad got up and opened the gun safe beside their bed, loaded the Marlin Model HC-22 rifle, and shot his 4-year-old son Hunter twice. Meanwhile, their daughter Alexis was watching TV in the family room when she heard the gunshot. She rushed to the bedroom and witnessed the horrific scene of her brother being shot as she reached the doorway. Terrified, Alexis turned and ran as fast as she could. Laura, who was with her children, rushed to help her child Hunter. She then yelled at the other kids to flee and save themselves. Alexis saw the oldest boy running out the wrong door towards a field and shouted at him to keep going. Chad followed him, and moments later, he shot his 7-year-old son Clayton. After Clayton fell to the ground, bleeding badly, Chad stood next to him, seemingly triumphant. Alexis witnessed the entire scene, horrified. She then ran into the house, grabbed her youngest brother, and escaped to safety, desperate to protect their lives. Chad chased after Alexis and caught up to her, raising his gun and ordering her to put down the 3-year-old Chase. Alexis wept and begged Chad not to shoot her, pleading with him to stop. Chad attempted to shoot her in the head, but luckily he had just run out of bullets. Alexis fled to the nearby fire station, where she stopped a passing woman and urgently told her that her stepfather had killed her entire family. She then called 911 at 4:15 p.m. She was running down the street, saying her stepfather had killed everyone in her family. She called 911 and explained that she said her stepfather was killing everybody in her house. The 911 operator asked if she could tell how many people had been shot. She replied that she thought it was 2 children. Meanwhile, 3-year-old Chase was reunited with his mother. However, a heated argument erupted between Chad and Laura over custody of Chase. Chad attempted to wrestle Chase away from Laura, but she clung to him desperately, trying to shield him from harm. In a shocking turn of events, Chad bit Laura and then pressed the gun to her thumb, firing it. Severely wounded, Laura released her grip on Chase. Chad then callously shot Chase in the head. Afterwards, he coldly arranged the lifeless bodies of all 3 children in a straight line. Having committed the atrocities, Chad sat calmly on his front porch, feigning nonchalance, while Laura lay inside the house, screaming for help. Following the 911 call, police officers arrived at the scene at 4:25 p.m. When they arrived, they found Chad sitting on his porch, a rifle beside him. The officers promptly apprehended him and put him in handcuffs. Chad displayed a calm demeanor and offered no resistance. While one officer restrained him, another tended to the 3 victims. Despite their efforts, paramedics were unable to save the children, who succumbed to their gunshot wounds. Laura was subsequently rushed to the University of Cincinnati Medical Center to receive treatment for her injuries. Chad Derman's stepdaughter, Alexis, was fortunate to have escaped the tragic events alive. On June 15, 2023, she managed to flee the house, the same day Chad killed his 3 sons. The police arrested him at 4:27 p.m. When officers apprehended him, he displayed a surprising calmness and politeness, as if nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. Subsequently, he was taken into custody for further questioning and investigation. During the interrogation, Chad Derman confessed to the police that he had been planning the murders since October 2022. He also revealed to the investigators that he had gone without sleep for 3 to 4 days, overwhelmed by the unbearable thought of killing his own sons. These confessions provided a disturbing insight into his state of mind in the lead-up to the tragic events. The investigation continued, focusing on whether Chad had a history of violent behavior. To this end, investigators examined his phone records, which showed that he had mainly been cited for traffic violations in Claremont County, with one exception, an incident when he was 18 involving criminal damage. Furthermore, they discovered a domestic violence case from 2010 in which Chad was accused of choking his father, Keith Derman. However, the case was eventually dropped when Keith Derman failed to appear in court to testify for the prosecution. These records provided valuable insight into Chad's legal history and his past interactions with law enforcement in the county. During the investigation, a neighbor, Richard Van Kanen, shared his observations with a news channel, stating that Chad was consistently angry, yelling at his wife and kids, and belittling them. The woman who had called 911 also gave an interview to the news channel, describing how she had been running with her little black lab screaming for someone to call 911 because her stepfather was shooting everyone in her household. Investigators looked into whether Derman was experiencing financial difficulties. They discovered that he had bought a converted manufactured home on a 3-acre property in 2016 for $75,000 and had been paying his property taxes up to 2023, suggesting that he wasn't having trouble with his mortgage payments. Detectives also spoke with Keith Derman, Chad's 59-year-old father. He was in a state of complete shock upon learning what his son had done and couldn't fathom how his child could commit such a heinous act. The father revealed that Chad had been dealing with some personal issue that had become too much for him to handle and that he might have kept many things hidden from him. Keith Derman tearfully described Chad as a good kid, expressing deep distress over the situation. On June 23, 2023, Chad initially entered a guilty plea and confessed to his crimes during the first court hearing. However, in a surprising turn of events, he later maintained his innocence and pleaded not guilty to the charges against him during the subsequent court hearing on the same day. The judge described the case as an evil horror that was impossible to process and incomprehensible cruelty. The tragic events unfolded when the father, who stood before the court, brutally executed his 3 young sons, aged 3, 4, and 7, in his own home using a rifle. David Gast, chief prosecutor of the municipal court in Claremont County, revealed shocking details about the case, stating that Chad had meticulously planned the events. Chad's son had attempted to escape in a nearby field, but Chad chased, caught, and returned him to the yard, where he was brutally killed along with his brothers. According to Gast, the trauma inflicted by Chad on his family, community, law enforcement, and first responders is unimaginable. The prosecutor emphasized that Chad's admission of guilt in this case has left them grappling with the sheer horror of his actions. He described Chad's killing of his sons as one of the most heinous, craven, and cowardly acts they will ever encounter. The bill of particulars, filed in Claremont County, revealed the full extent of the crime. Gast explained that Chad deliberately lined up the boys and shot them, confirming that Chad himself admitted to planning the killings. When the mother intervened, she was shot in the hand. The prosecutor disclosed that Chad fired 9 shots, causing catastrophic harm, with one boy hit once and the other 2 each shot 4 times. The prosecutor, Mark Talvey, described to the judge the cruel manner in which Chad Dorman murdered his 3 sons, leaving the family and community in shock. Chad confessed to the crime, stating that he had done it and should be taken to jail, expressing regret and acknowledging that he shouldn't have shot them. Talvey emphasized that he would push for the death penalty for Chad Dorman. Initially, Chad faced 21 charges related to the tragic events that occurred on June 15, 2023. Specifically, he was accused of shooting and killing his 3 young children, 4-year-old Hunter, 7-year-old Clayton, and 3-year-old Chase, in an execution-style manner. The grand jury has now indicted Chad on 21 counts, including 9 counts of aggravated murder, 8 counts of kidnapping, and 4 counts of felony assault, which could lead to the death penalty if convicted. Claremont County Municipal Court Judge Jason Nagel ruled that Chad Dorman should be held in the Claremont County Jail and set his bail at a record-breaking $20 million. During a subsequent court hearing, Dorman's lawyer requested that the death penalty be removed from consideration, arguing that Dorman was severely mentally ill when he fatally shot his 3 sons on June 15, 2023. Dorman has since pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity nearly 9 months after the incident. The Claremont County prosecutors allege that Dorman deliberately killed his 3 young sons. Experts will reassess Dorman's mental state at the time of the murders. Dorman's lawyer maintains that executing someone with severe mental illness is cruel and unusual punishment, violating both the Ohio and U.S. constitutions. Those suffering from severe mental illness at the time of the alleged offense are not as morally responsible as others. The prosecution has requested a mental evaluation and a court date was set for May 3, 2024, to discuss the lawyer's request. Chad's lawyers had agreed to provide a report from a mental health expert by June 3, 2024, to support their claim that he was mentally ill when the crime occurred. During a March 2024 court hearing, Chad's lawyers contended that the Claremont County Sheriff's deputies failed to uphold his Miranda rights following his arrest. The judge has subsequently ruled that Chad Dorman's confession, allegedly given during his interrogation, will be dismissed this Friday. The judge's decision was based on the grounds that the defendant's rights were violated on two separate occasions. Firstly, when police omitted parts of the Miranda warnings, and secondly, when detectives continued questioning Chad Dorman after he requested an attorney. The prosecution called several witnesses, including police officers who responded to the scene, to describe their encounters with Chad. According to prosecutors, almost all of Chad's interactions with the sheriff's deputies and detectives were recorded. The first witness to testify in court was Claremont County Deputy Chad P. Mann, a K-9 handler deputy. Deputy P. Mann stated that he was the first officer to arrive at the scene, and the first thing he noticed was the defendant sitting on the porch near a rifle. After a lengthy court hearing, Judge Richard Fank ruled that the investigators failed to follow proper procedure during Chad's arrest in June 2023, violating his Miranda rights. Chad's lawyers argued that he requested a lawyer at least twice during his 3-hour interrogation, but detectives ignored his requests and continued questioning him. They also claimed that Chad's initial guilty plea was a result of pressure from investigators. The judge's decision stated that the detectives did not fully inform Chad of his rights before the interrogation, making any statements he made during that time inadmissible in future court proceedings. This ruling significantly impacted the trial, limiting the evidence that could be presented against Chad and adding complexity to the legal process, which has heightened public interest in the case. If convicted, Chad faces the death penalty, with his trial set to begin in July. However, this recent ruling may alter the course of the trial. A final court hearing is scheduled for June 14th, just before the anniversary of the incident, and the trial is expected to take place from July 8th to August 2nd, 2024. The motive behind Chad's actions remains unknown. Speculation suggests that he may have been motivated by a belief that his 34-year-old wife was cheating on him, but this is unconfirmed. Earlier, hundreds attended a fundraiser for the victim's family, which the community sees as the least they can do to support them while the boy's father awaits trial for their murders. A memorial service was held on June 26th at First Baptist Church of Glenestee to honor the three boys. At the family's request, community members wore bright colors. The community is still grappling with the tragedy of the shootings and the loss of 3 innocent lives. Outpourings of support for the family, friends, classmates, and first responders continue to grow, showing no signs of slowing. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michaela Gerecht. On November 19, 1988, Michaela, then 9 years old, and her friend Katrina were busy trying on different outfits for an upcoming school performance at their homes. The joy was palpable as it marked the beginning of the Thanksgiving break. Around 10 a.m., Katrina's dad gave her $5 to buy some candy. The two friends rushed to Michaela's house to ask her mom if they could visit the nearby store, which was less than a mile away. Although they had been to the store many times before, with family or older neighbors, Michaela's mom was hesitant to let them go alone, citing their young age and lack of experience. After some cajoling, Michaela's mom finally agreed, on the condition that they would purchase the candy and head straight back home. As Michaela was her parents' long-awaited first child, a true miracle, her mom was particularly concerned about her safety. Despite her reservations, Michaela's mom believed that nothing bad would happen, given the store's proximity and their plan to ride their scooters there. Michaela raced back to Katrina's house. They planned to use 2 scooters, so Katrina took hers and borrowed another one from her brother. They went to the store, parked their scooters nearby, and went inside to make their purchases. When they came out, they got engrossed in conversation and completely forgot about their scooters. They started walking home but quickly realized their mistake and returned to where they had left the scooters. That's when they noticed Michaela's scooter was missing. Assuming someone had moved it, they decided to search the store area from different angles. Michaela scanned the parking lot and soon spotted her scooter next to a car parked a short distance from the store. As she approached it, Katrina suddenly heard a terrifying scream. She ran back and saw a man grabbing Michaela and forcing her into the car beside her scooter. The man promptly got back in the driver's seat and sped off. Shaken, Katrina rushed into the store and alerted the cashier about the incident. The cashier immediately called the police, who arrived at the scene within minutes. The store employee also contacted Michaela's father, as they were acquainted, and informed him of the situation. Michaela's father, accompanied by Katrina's father, hurried to the store where investigators had already gathered. He instructed his wife to remain at home by the phone, awaiting a possible call from the police. The detectives faced a multitude of challenges from the outset. The lack of surveillance cameras near the store and the sole witness, Katrina, who was in a state of deep shock and barely able to speak, hindered their progress. Her father was permitted to take her home, leaving the store cashier as the initial lead. She recounted a suspicious individual loitering around the store shortly before the abduction. He had parked his car, exited, but never entered the store, instead opting to walk along the building, peering through windows and seemingly watching them. The cashier had a gut feeling that he might be planning to rob her. Based on her description, the man was white, approximately 30 years old, and sported a prominent mustache. He arrived in an old maroon-colored sedan, but the model and license plate number remained unclear. After gathering the suspect's description, the police created a composite sketch and disseminated it to the media. News of the abduction spread rapidly throughout the city and beyond, leaving the public shocked that such a brazen act could occur in a busy area. The police also shared the sketch and a description of the suspect's car with hundreds of patrol officers across the county. Officers began stopping vehicles matching the description, hoping to find her alive. Meanwhile, the detectives turned over Maya's scooter to forensic experts for analysis. They suspected that the kidnapper had witnessed Maya and Katrina's arrival at the store and strategically positioned one of the scooters near the back door of his car to facilitate the abduction. This led them to believe that his fingerprints might be on the scooter, and indeed they discovered a fingerprint that didn't match anyone in Katrina's family or the 9-year-old girl. However, there was a hitch. The fingerprint was incomplete, making it challenging to conduct a database search at the time, as the technology wasn't sophisticated enough for such procedures. As a result, the police had to rely on direct comparisons with potential suspects. By the evening of the abduction, the FBI had joined the investigation, prompted by a surge in child disappearances, not only in Hayward but also in surrounding cities. They suspected a link between Michaela's case and these other vanishings. Despite the FBI's involvement and widespread media attention, little progress was made in locating the missing girl. Michaela's parents were understandably heartbroken, and her mother was consumed by guilt, replaying the events leading up to the abduction. In particular, she recalled an unsettling incident just a week prior where Michaela had risen unusually early, sat at the kitchen table, and claimed to be writing a poem. This was peculiar, given her daughter's usual sleep patterns, and the poem's theme, people being abducted and hidden in attics but not killed, seemed eerily prescient. At the time, her mother had found it strange for a 9-year-old to conceive such ideas, but in hindsight, it took on an uncanny, almost prophetic quality, leaving her to wonder if Michaela had unwittingly foreseen her own fate. In the 2 days following the abduction, the police launched an exhaustive search for the suspect and the missing girl, but despite their best efforts, they failed to make any progress. In a bid to gather more information, they decided to re-interview Katrina, hoping that time might have jogged her memory. However, this decision led to a perplexing twist. The girl who witnessed the abduction and the cashier provided contradictory descriptions of the kidnapper's appearance. Katrina described the man as around 20 years old, with long, unkempt, light-colored hair that reached his shoulders and a face covered in pimples. She also remembered his piercing blue eyes, reminiscent of a fox's. Furthermore, she recalled some details about the car, a beige sedan with a boxy shape and numerous dents. In contrast, the cashier's suspicion had been sparked by a man near the store whose description was vastly different from Katrina's. This discrepancy presented a significant challenge for the investigators, who had already circulated an inaccurate composite sketch of the suspect through the media, and to patrol officers, leading the search for an entirely different individual. This unfolding drama took place within the critical first 48 hours following the abduction, the most crucial period for a swift resolution. Based on her description, they promptly created a new composite sketch and redistributed it. Additionally, the police decided to interview all men in the area with prior convictions for sexual offenses. Numerous volunteers also joined the efforts, going door to door to interview residents in the hopes of someone recognizing the abductor or providing any other relevant information. They posted thousands of flyers featuring her photo and a description of the incident. And in just the initial few days, a staggering 42,000 of these flyers were distributed. After several days, they received their first promising lead. 3 individuals contacted them, reporting a hiking trip in a vast national park near their city. During their excursion, the hikers stumbled upon footprints on the ground, distinguishing one set belonging to an adult and another to a child. They decided to follow these tracks, eventually coming across a blanket and empty fast food wrappers deep in the forest. The police considered the possibility that these tracks might be connected to Maya and her abductor. The FBI's psychological profile also suggested that the abductor would likely take his victim to a secluded location, far removed from civilization. Given the park's size and its proximity to the city, it seemed to align perfectly with this theory. Detectives decided to conduct a thorough search of the park, utilizing all available resources. They scoured the ground, while helicopters equipped with thermal imaging scanned the area from above. However, all their efforts yielded nothing, as they couldn't find her or any incriminating evidence. The police extended their search to other parks, mountains, and remote areas, but all leads proved futile. Meanwhile, the case's nationwide media coverage sparked a deluge of tips, with over 4,000 received within the first month alone. Investigators faced the daunting task of pursuing each lead, a challenge that proved overwhelming. The case was a hot topic of discussion among San Francisco's neighboring residents and nearby cities, with prominent figures even making public appeals for information. As the search continued, a substantial $70,000 reward was offered, and Michaela's photograph was plastered on millions of milk cartons across the state. Despite the massive community effort and numerous leads, detectives made little headway. By December's end, a month and a half into the investigation, the police had only managed to exhaust thousands of leads, with no progress made in the following months. Still, the police, along with Michaela's mother, who had launched her own investigation, studying similar cases and searching for possible suspects, persisted in their efforts, holding on to the hope that Michaela was still alive, being held captive by her abductor. In 1991, detectives focused on 43-year-old Timothy Binder, and the deeper they dug into his background, the more disturbing it became. Before Michaela's abduction, Binder was already under police suspicion due to his odd behavior. He had been sending gifts, letters, and money to several young girls, with some of these letters featuring highlighted Bible passages that included phrases like, "I have chosen you, and be with me." Parents of some of these girls grew concerned and reported him to the police, which led to an interrogation of Binder. He claimed he was simply trying to befriend these girls, thinking they were lonely. However, the investigation uncovered a worrying history. In 1985, Binder was fired from his job in Child Protective Services in Colorado for collecting personal information about young girls and then sending them gifts and letters. A search of his van revealed many photographs of children and Bible passages decorating the interior. Additionally, Binder had previously been arrested for trying to lure 2 girls into his van, although no charges were filed. Furthermore, he regularly visited local cemeteries, spending an unusual amount of time at the graves of young girls. 6 months before Michaela was abducted, a 7-year-old girl named Amber vanished in the same area. Binder got in touch with Amber's mother, offering to help and frequently visiting her home. He even sent a letter to the police, predicting that the next girl to go missing would be 9 years old. Months later, Michaela, who was also 9, was abducted. After she disappeared, Binder contacted her mother repeatedly, visited her home, and offered his assistance. But the disturbing pattern continued. In early December 1988, Binder sent a Christmas card to an FBI profiler he had spoken to before, and the card showed a girl holding up 4 fingers. Shortly after, a 4-year-old girl went missing in the same town. Despite these disturbing circumstances, which comprised circumstantial evidence, detectives secured a search warrant for Binder's home, where he resided with his wife. Unfortunately, their search yielded no concrete leads linking him to the abductions. When news of Binder's peculiar behavior hit the newspapers, the public began to suspect he might be a serial killer, resulting in harassment and attacks on him and his family. He subsequently sued the city authorities for disseminating misinformation and emerged victorious. Detectives persisted in investigating Binder for several months, but ultimately concluded that there was no concrete evidence implicating him in these crimes. Some detectives believed that he posed no threat to children, and his unusual behavior might have been unrelated to these cases. Consequently, the police shifted their focus towards alternative suspects. A new substantial lead did not emerge until December 1992, 4 years after Michaela's disappearance. An inmate from Indiana, serving time for robbery, contacted the police, claiming to know the identity of her abductor. He stated that he had helped bury her body in the same park where traces of evidence had been discovered. Initially, investigators showed little interest in this tip, but when the inmate wrote a letter to a prominent San Francisco newspaper, the police faced harsh criticism, and under public pressure, they reluctantly decided to interview him. He promised not only to pinpoint Michaela's exact burial site, but also to lead them directly to the killer. The inmate was transferred to California, where he collaborated with the police on a search mission. He claimed that the body was buried in a gladiolus field, and the officers devoted all their resources to scouring that area. The search lasted 8 hours, until the inmate unexpectedly confessed that he had fabricated the entire story. He explained that his intention was to bring some comfort to Michaela's family and help them find closure. However, Michaela's relatives and the police were outraged by his false statement. As a consequence, the inmate received an additional 6.5-year prison sentence, nearly doubling his original sentence, and was ordered to pay Michaela's family $6,000 in compensation. In August 2000, a new lead emerged in the case with the arrest of Curtis Anderson, suspected of murdering a 7-year-old girl in Valo a year earlier. He confessed to the crime and was imprisoned. However, detectives harbored suspicions that he might be responsible for similar crimes. For 7 years, no concrete evidence supported this theory until Curtis reached out to the FBI. Weakened by poor health, he wanted to confess to additional crimes before his demise. His confession revealed that he had killed 13 more girls and women, including 7-year-old Amber, who vanished 6 months before Michaela. Curtis provided specific details that made investigators take his involvement seriously. Nonetheless, proving his guilt remained a daunting task, as there was no physical evidence and the victims' bodies remained unfound. Regarding Michaela's case, Curtis denied any involvement, despite his car's striking resemblance to Katrina's description. Although FBI agents planned to continue questioning him, Curtis passed away in 2012, halting the investigation. A new lead emerged when an inmate contacted the police, suggesting that his associate Lauren Herzog bore a remarkable likeness to the composite sketch of the suspect. Detectives were intrigued, given Lauren and his partner's conviction for multiple murders they committed together. Although suspected of killing 19 people, investigators could only prove some of these crimes. Notably, Lauren had taken his own life in prison a month before the inmate came forward. Undeterred, the police investigated Lauren's potential involvement. A younger photo of Lauren did resemble the composite sketch, but detectives required more concrete evidence. They proceeded to excavate a well where Lauren and his partner had disposed of their victims' bodies. The excavation yielded thousands of bone fragments, which medical experts meticulously examined. After extensive analysis, it was determined that the bones belonged to 5 different girls, but none matched Michaela's DNA. Despite excavating multiple wells, the police were unable to find any evidence linking Lauren to the case. In 2018, a significant breakthrough emerged in the case. David Mitch, a man already imprisoned for killing his 39-year-old girlfriend in 1989, was charged with the murders of 2 women in 1986 near Michaela's town. The key to this development was modern DNA analysis, which enabled investigators to link David to these crimes by analyzing biological material found under the victim's nails, something that was impossible back then. Detectives decided to investigate his possible involvement in Michaela's case and found several intriguing connections. They discovered that David was in the same area when Michaela was abducted, matching Katrina's description and driving a similar car. Since David's fingerprints were already on record, experts re-examined the partial fingerprint found on Michaela's scooter. Thanks to modern technology, they made a significant breakthrough. The fingerprint on the scooter perfectly matched David's. By 2020, the hope of Michaela being alive had faded, and David was charged with her murder. He denied his involvement, and the case went to trial in early 2023. Preliminary hearings took place, and the judge ruled that there was sufficient evidence to proceed with the trial. David's lawyer attempted to challenge the evidence, claiming that the scooter's fingerprint didn't necessarily link his client to the crime. However, given the circumstances, this argument seemed dubious, as it was apparent that the abductor had deliberately left the scooter near the car's back door to ambush her when she approached. The defense also tried to contest the murder charges, as Michaela's body was never found, implying a lack of proof of her death. However, this argument held little weight, as numerous modern cases have resulted in convictions without the recovery of the victim's body, given the substantial evidence. Furthermore, David had a history of violent crimes throughout his life. Michaela's father traveled from out of state to attend the press conference announcing the arrest of his daughter's kidnapper. Unfortunately, Michaela's mother, who had held on to hope of finding her daughter alive all these years, was unable to attend as she battled cancer. Shortly after the news of the arrest, she passed away, thanking the investigators for uncovering the truth before her life's end. The police pledged to continue searching for Michaela's remains, offering a $10,000 reward for any valuable information that could lead to her discovery. David's trial is about to start and will cover 3 separate cases: the murder of Michaela and 2 other cases where his DNA was found under the victim's fingernails. Initially, the prosecution pushed for the death penalty, but when the district attorney changed, the new one decided not to pursue it. If David is found guilty of all 3 murders, he will not receive a life sentence, but rather a prison sentence of several decades. This decision has outraged the victims, families, and garnered significant media attention. with David's lawyer being the only one to support this change. However, considering David is already 62 years old, it's unlikely he will live to see the end of even this reduced sentence. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Athena Strand. Athena Strand was born on May 25, 2015, in Duncan, Oklahoma, a small American town. Following her parents' divorce, her father relocated to Texas, while Athena remained with her mother in Oklahoma. Despite the distance, her father maintained regular contact, visiting her frequently, and her mother also made sure Athena spent quality time with him, given their amicable relationship. Later, both her parents remarried, and Athena gained two younger sisters, with whom she shared a strong bond, always seeking to spend as much time with them as possible. Athena was a cheerful child, always exuding positivity, with a passion for outdoor play and exploration. In late 2022, at the age of 7, she temporarily relocated to live with her father in Texas until the New Year holidays, after which she would return to her mother in Oklahoma. During her time in Texas, Athena attended a local elementary school. Her father's rural home, surrounded by woods and fields, provided the perfect setting for her to bond with her dad and his new wife, Elizabeth, in the beauty of nature. On November 30th, Athena returned home from school around 4:15 p.m., just like any other day. With her father and grandfather out hunting, she was left alone with Elizabeth. But that evening, Athena's mood was off, leading to an argument with Elizabeth. Upset, Athena retreated to her room, while Elizabeth headed to the kitchen to prepare dinner. 20 minutes later, Elizabeth went to call Athena for dinner, but she was nowhere to be found. Elizabeth searched the entire house and yard, but there was no sign of the girl. She then called her husband's relatives who lived nearby, but they claimed they hadn't seen Athena. Elizabeth then called her husband, explaining the situation, and he immediately told her to contact the police and rushed home. At 6:40, Elizabeth dialed 911, and officers arrived within 14 minutes. She recounted the events and shared her theory that Athena might have run away due to their argument. However, the girl's relatives remained skeptical, given Athena's age of 7 and her history of never straying far from home, especially at night when she was afraid of the dark. Initially, the police viewed Elizabeth with skepticism, primarily due to the 40-minute delay in reporting her child missing after realizing she was gone. However, after listening to her detailed account of searching the entire house and contacting relatives, they concluded that she was likely telling the truth. The officers promptly launched a search of the surrounding area, undeterred by the darkness, and meticulously combed through the forests and fields within a several-kilometer radius of the house. They focused their search on the area around the house, thinking Athena might have wandered off and got lost in the darkness, based on their main theory. While they also looked into the possibility of her being abducted, they didn't find any evidence to support this, since there was no sign of forced entry. Elizabeth didn't report hearing any noises or screams, and the neighbors didn't see anything suspicious that evening. Athena's relatives and concerned townspeople assisted the police in their search efforts. As soon as Athena's mother heard about her daughter's disappearance, she rushed to the scene. The search continued until almost 5 a.m., but they failed to find any signs of Athena. The area around the house, especially during dark hours, was difficult to access, which complicated the search. At 7 a.m., the police resumed their search, this time with more officers. As news of Athena's disappearance spread throughout the county, hundreds of volunteers joined the effort. Some volunteers searched the area on horseback and ATVs, while the police used drones and helicopters equipped with thermal cameras. Despite their efforts, Athena remained missing by the end of the day. The police were increasingly concerned for her life, given the onset of winter and the 50 degrees Fahrenheit temperature in Texas, which would have been challenging for Athena, who was wearing light clothing. On the third day, the police broadened their search to a radius of miles around the house, suspecting a potential criminal element in Athena's disappearance. Despite initial doubts that she had wandered off, they grew more convinced that she hadn't left the house voluntarily. Over the next few days, they scoured the surrounding area in all directions, covering several miles, but found no trace of the girl, as it seemed unlikely she could have walked that far without encountering anyone. Investigators sought to identify those near Athena's house that evening, a challenge due to the secluded location. However, they soon got a break. A courier service had delivered a package that same evening. FedEx led them to the responsible organization and the specific van, which was equipped with cameras, providing key surveillance footage. After rewinding the footage to the time when the van arrived at the house, investigators uncovered disturbing evidence. The footage showed the driver, later identified as 31-year-old Tanner Horner, pulling a girl who looked like Athena into the vehicle. The police promptly apprehended Tanner at his address on suspicion of abduction and took him in for questioning. Tanner confessed to delivering a package to Athena's house that evening. He hit her with his van while backing up, but she was conscious and uninjured. Athena told him her name, and they conversed. Panicked, Tanner put her in his van, unsure what to do. When Athena said she'd tell her father, Tanner's anxiety grew, fearing legal consequences if she told adults about the accident. After that, Tanner's bizarre confession left the investigators perplexed. He claimed that, in his words, killing her seemed the only viable option. First, he attempted to break her neck, but it didn't work, so he resorted to strangling her. Then, he transported her body to a nearby river and discarded it in the water. The police were naturally skeptical of this account, but Tanner provided them with the exact location where he had left Athena's body. They immediately went to the site and indeed found her remains. The news of the young girl's brutal murder sent shockwaves throughout the country, leaving her relatives and thousands of others stunned. As the case garnered widespread media attention, the public was horrified by the sheer cruelty of the crime. After the body was found, Tanner was charged with abduction and murder. As detectives awaited the medical examiner's report, they delved deeper into the criminal's identity, seeking to understand his motives. Tanner's version of events seemed utterly far-fetched. He claimed to have lightly struck the girl with his van, causing no serious harm. Yet, he was allegedly so terrified that he immediately decided to kill her, fearing that hitting a child without causing harm might only lead to his job loss. His story appeared highly improbable. Tanner, engaged with a year-old child, worked as an Uber driver and musician, performing in Fort Worth cafes. His social media showed a normal life, with photos of his child and musical performances. With no prior legal issues, there was no indication he was capable of cruel violence. 2 months prior to Athena's tragic death, the delivery man had shared photos on social media, showcasing heartwarming moments spent with his son and grandparents. The wait for the medical examiner's report, which was anticipated to clarify the exact sequence of events, dragged on for several weeks. During this time, Athena's grief-stricken parents took legal action against FedEx and the contracting company, alleging that they had failed to implement adequate employee screening measures, hence allowing Horner to continue working and paving the way for such a heinous crime. A devastating twist in this tragic tale emerged. The package Horner had delivered on that fateful evening was, in fact, a Christmas gift for Athena, a Barbie doll she had long coveted, which her parents had ordered for her. As the medical examiner's findings were made public, even more questions surfaced in the case. According to the document, the victim's death occurred within an hour of her abduction, with her body showing injuries of varying severity. The cause of death was asphyxiation. Initially, detectives believed that the killer, Horner, had abducted the girl to sexually assault her after spotting her near the house. However, medical experts found no evidence to support this theory, which puzzled the police. The detectives didn't believe the killer's account of events, as it lacked a logical explanation. They speculated that the perpetrator's initial plan was to sexually assault the girl, but something went awry. One theory is that after arguing with her father's wife, the victim went outside and was in the yard when Horner arrived to deliver a package. Noticing the girl alone and isolated, he saw an opportunity to act on his depraved fantasies. Horner could have lured the girl into his van through deception or attacked her to put her in the vehicle without a struggle. What happened next is unclear, with two main theories emerging. It's possible that Horner had planned to abduct the girl and take her far away from the house to commit his intended crimes. However, she may have started screaming or tried to escape, fearing capture, which led him to kill her. Afterwards, he dumped her body in the river. According to an alternative scenario, Horner might have engaged in inappropriate behavior towards the victim without physically touching her. In this case, a medical examination would not have revealed any evidence of sexual assault. The detectives stumbled upon an unexpected clue suggesting a sexual motive behind the crime. What was unusual about Horner was that he had no prior criminal record, which is rare in most cases. Typically, people who are capable of murder start with less severe crimes. The detective spent weeks meticulously investigating Horner's past, speaking to his relatives, friends, and acquaintances to uncover any hints of potential involvement in other crimes. Eventually, they made a breakthrough. The police identified several individuals who alleged they were victimized by Horner during their childhood. To protect the investigation, the authorities did not release the victims' identities or disclose full details of the incidents. However, it is known that one of the victims accused Horner of assaulting her 9 years prior. Additionally, he was charged with 3 counts of sexual assault involving minors in 2013, although it is unclear whether these incidents involved one or multiple victims. One of Horner's victims had been publicly sharing her story for years, describing how he assaulted her when she was 16. She used social media to raise awareness about Horner's criminal nature, but despite this, he faced no consequences and was not considered a suspect. The victim stated that for years, nobody believed her allegations. However, after Horner killed Athena, these allegations gained significant attention, revealing Horner's true character and possible motives. Horner faces multiple trials, including Athena's murder. A disturbing TikTok video shows him watching a bug being killed with a spray, his face showing an unsettling pleasure. This hints at sadistic tendencies, making his account of Athena's murder even more suspicious. Horner claimed he killed Athena to avoid punishment for a lesser crime, but this excuse seems absurd given his sadistic nature. Authorities are seeking the death penalty, backed by video footage and Horner's own testimony. His guilt is clear, and additional evidence may be presented during the trial. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Ryan Widmer. Ryan Widmer, a young athlete, was convicted of a horrific crime and is serving a life sentence with parole eligibility in 2025, over 10 years after the tragedy occurred. He is now fighting to overturn his conviction. The case has garnered widespread public attention across 3 neighboring states, sparking controversy surrounding his guilt. The unusual circumstances of Sarah Widmer's death and the lack of a clear motive for the crime have made this case highly controversial. Ryan and Sarah met at a local cafe they both frequented. When Ryan ordered a cup of coffee, Sarah noticed a book on his table that she had recently read. This shared interest in literature sparked a conversation that lasted several hours, covering topics such as books, movies, music, and their common interests. As they learned more about each other, they discovered a shared love for nature, traveling, and animals. With each successive meeting, their relationship grew closer and more trusting, eventually blossoming into true love. After a few months, Ryan and Sarah's relationship blossomed, and he proposed to her during a romantic dinner at the same cafe where they first met. Overjoyed, Sarah accepted his proposal. The young couple set a wedding date and began searching for a beautiful 2-story house in Hamilton. On April 10, 2008, they exchanged vows in a quaint and intimate church ceremony, surrounded by their closest friends and family. Sarah brought every detail to life, making the day truly unforgettable. She stunned in her white dress, leaving Ryan spellbound. Following the grand banquet, which was met with thunderous applause and joyful cheers, they embarked on a 2-week honeymoon to the Hawaiian Islands, where they reveled in each other's company and the breathtaking natural beauty. The young couple, deeply in love, had made plans for a future together, filled with hopes and dreams of starting a family. However, fate had other plans. On Monday, August 11, 2008, after Sarah finished her shift at the dental clinic, she met Ryan at her favorite cafe. They had dinner together, engaging in lively conversation, and afterwards walked home, where Sarah began sorting out the groceries she had bought. She then sat down on the couch, and Ryan handed her a glass of water and a pill, as she had complained of a headache during dinner. They spent the rest of the evening watching their favorite TV show, exchanging gentle kisses, and eventually, Sarah headed upstairs to the bedroom. She undressed, neatly folding her clothes, prepared a towel, lit scented candles, and put on her favorite music. Meanwhile, Ryan stayed downstairs, flipping channels on the TV remote, briefly stopping at a soccer game and lying on the couch for about 10 minutes. He called out to Sarah over the soft music, but she didn't respond. Ryan slowly made his way upstairs, entered the bedroom, and turned on the TV. He called out to Sarah again, but was met with silence. Panic started to set in, and he rushed to the bathroom, where he found Sarah lying face down in the tub. Ryan immediately pulled the plug and grabbed the phone to call emergency services. At 10:49 p.m., the service recorded the call, with Ryan frantically yelling that his wife had drowned in the bathtub, likely having fallen asleep. In his panic, Ryan failed to follow the dispatcher's instructions, wasting precious time. Under the dispatcher's careful guidance, Ryan eventually managed to pull Sarah out of the tub and performed CPR on her repeatedly. The ambulance, accompanied by police officers, arrived at the Widmer home just 6 minutes after the call. The police were initially drawn to the scene of the tragedy. Upon inspection, the bathroom appeared clean and dry, with no signs of water or scattered supplies that would indicate a hasty removal of a body from the water. The bathroom was meticulously clean. Sarah lay on the bedroom floor, nude with dry skin, but her wet hair suggested drowning. The bedroom was also tidy, leading law enforcement to suspect murder. Ryan, wearing only his underwear, was thrashing about the bedroom. When medical professionals found no pulse, they began performing cardiopulmonary resuscitation. A pinkish-white discharge from Sarah's nose and mouth confirmed drowning. Medical staff attempted to intubate Sarah twice as she lay on the bedroom floor, but both attempts failed. She was then rushed to an ambulance, where 2 more attempts were made to revive her heart using a defibrillator, again without success. Throughout the ordeal, Ryan remained by his wife's side, visibly distraught and anxious, as described by medical staff. Within 20 minutes of arriving at the hospital, medical staff attempted to revive Sarah, but at 11:41 p.m., an emergency physician pronounced her dead. Ryan, overcome with grief, fell to his knees in the hospital hallway and wept. The sudden tragedy that occurred just 4 months after the wedding sent shockwaves throughout the city, and Ryan became the prime suspect in the murder of his young wife. Ryan's initial statement, given at the hospital, raised doubts about its accuracy. He claimed that only he and his wife were at home, and that nothing out of the ordinary had happened. They had dinner at a cafe, returned home, and watched TV together. Sarah had a headache, and he gave her painkillers and helped her to the bathroom when he found her. However, the emergency call record showed that the victim was lying face down, contradicting Ryan's account. The man was distraught, repeatedly calling out for Sarah. Under pressure from the investigator, Ryan shifted from being a victim to a participant in the investigation, working to uncover what had happened to Sarah that night. He agreed to let investigators search their house. Analysis of the medication Sarah took revealed it was a common painkiller, but it was discovered that Sarah's frequent headaches and migraines had led her to take a course of drugs that altered her hormonal balance, causing uncontrollable sleep. This became the initial theory behind Sarah's death. After searching the house, police found bloodstains on the carpet. When they arrived, the bathtub was dry and there were no wet towels. The tile floor was also dry and clean, leading police to suspect that Sarah had been murdered. No wet items, clothing, or other objects were found in the house that could have been used to soak up water. Ryan's statements during the 911 call and at the hospital were contradictory, which raised suspicions and turned him from a victim into a suspect. An examination of Sarah's body revealed bruises on her forehead, neck, armpit, and upper lip, as well as lacerations on her upper lip. However, there was no clear evidence of a struggle, as her fingernails were not broken or chipped, and there were no marks on her hands, elbows, or knees. Ryan's body also showed no signs of injury or struggle. An investigation by Sheriff Bishop was inconclusive, as all the bathroom supplies were in place, and there were no signs of resistance. It was unclear whether Sarah had taken a bath that evening, or if she had not resisted and allowed her husband to drown her. Sarah's autopsy, led by Dr. Russell Apt Grove, revealed that the cause of death was drowning, accompanied by multiple muscle hemorrhages in the front of her neck and contusions on her scalp. These injuries, which occurred before her death, raised many questions, but their origin remained unknown. The investigation struggled to make progress with no leads or answers. The toxicology tests found no traces of illicit or alcoholic substances in Sarah's blood. On August 13, 2008, Ryan was arrested on suspicion of aggravated murder of his wife. The decision was based on the discrepancies in the emergency call and the crime scene, as well as the injuries found on Sarah's body. This evidence was sufficient to charge him with her murder by drowning. Despite Ryan and Sarah's seemingly perfect relationship, with friends and neighbors testifying to their deep love for each other, and their public displays of affection, no one could understand what drove them to such a tragic end. In March 2009, the first court hearing took place. Ron Cronenberger, the emergency dispatcher who received the call, testified as a witness. He described Ryan as remaining calm during their conversation, stating that it seemed like Ryan was pretending to perform CPR by blowing into the tube. The prosecution argued that the 911 call, the crime scene, and Sarah's injuries provided sufficient evidence to prove Ryan's guilt. They alleged that Ryan had forcibly drowned Sarah by holding her underwater in a bathtub. The bathtub was a crucial piece of evidence in the case. Upon examination, police found fingerprint streaks, supposedly left by human hands, closer to the middle of the tub. Using a reflected ultraviolet imaging process, fingerprints and smears were detected on the tub. A forearm print was identified, and a hair follicle test revealed that it was left by an adult male, although the exact age of the print could not be determined. However, the bathtub was not the critical evidence needed to prove the struggle between Ryan and Sarah. The prosecution suggested to the jury that a violent altercation likely occurred that night at the Widmer home for unknown reasons, and that the suspect deliberately kept quiet about it. The defense team called in an expert to testify that it is highly unlikely for someone to fall asleep and drown in a bathtub unless they were under the influence of illegal drugs or alcohol. The expert explained that the sensation of water on the face would normally wake a person up or trigger a gag reflex, causing them to cough or choke. Even if the person didn't wake up, the lack of oxygen would eventually rouse them. The pathologist who performed the autopsy testified that if Sarah's body was dry, but her hair was wet, it could indicate that her head was forcibly pushed off the edge of a bathtub, toilet, or sink. This could have happened while her head was facing forward or backward, whether the water was running or the bathtub was full. The prosecution argued that Ryan held Sarah's head underwater until she drowned, making him guilty of the crime. On the other hand, the defense argued that Ryan was innocent, primarily because there was no clear motive for the alleged crime. They pointed out that if there had been a violent struggle, as the prosecution claimed, there would be evidence of it. However, there were no injuries on Ryan, and Sarah's fingernails showed no signs of breaking or chipping, suggesting that there was no struggle. They claimed that the injuries found on Sarah were caused by the prolonged CPR, direct cardiac massage, and repeated intubation attempts made that night at the house, in the ambulance, and at the hospital. At the defense's request, Dr. Werner Spitz performed a second autopsy on Sarah. He confirmed that the cause of death was drowning and observed injuries to her neck, arms, upper lip, skull, a lacerated liver, and bleeding on her neck. However, he couldn't determine whether these injuries occurred during CPR. It was argued that the EMTs tried to resuscitate Sarah for about 45 minutes and that the deep neck bleeding likely resulted from an IV inserted in that area. The EMTs had been unable to access her arm veins. Instead of ruling it a homicide, Dr. Spitz concluded that Sarah's death was undetermined. The defense based their case on the fact that Sarah's skin was dry, which dries faster than her hair. They conducted experiments to demonstrate that when Ryan found his wife unconscious, he instinctively pulled the drain plug to try and help her and then called emergency services. This sequence of events explains why her body was drier than expected. The water had already drained from the bathtub by the time Ryan called 911. An expert witness demonstrated that a person can dry off in as little as 7 minutes after emerging from the water. A second court hearing was set for May 2010. Ryan's father, Gary, claimed that the prosecution had obtained DNA results showing that Sarah had the disease, but the prosecutor refused to disclose them, believing they wouldn't have changed the jury's verdict. However, it remains uncertain whether the jury's decision would have been different if they had received reliable evidence about Sarah's medical condition, which could have contributed to her drowning. The official reason for denying a retrial was the jury's errors in their investigation. Despite another unsuccessful court hearing, Ryan remained incarcerated. The Widmer family received an unwelcome shock when Jennifer Cruz arrived at the prosecutor's office to testify against Ryan, claiming he was guilty. She identified herself as a friend of Ryan's, stating that they had regular communication via phone or email. According to Jennifer, Ryan contacted her on October 26, 2009 at 11:09 p.m., and his voice was highly distressed. He confided in her, saying that he had assaulted Sarah in the living room on the day she died. The trigger for the altercation was Sarah's discovery of Ryan's infidelity, leading to a prolonged argument that started downstairs and continued in the bedroom. Ryan pushed Sarah into the bathroom, leaving her without checking on her well-being. After calming down, he found Sarah floating lifelessly in the full bathtub. In an attempt to cover his tracks, Ryan allegedly wiped the water from the bathroom floor using towels and concocted a story about the accident. However, Ryan's defense team vigorously disputed Jennifer's testimony, pointing out several inconsistencies. The lawyers argued that Jennifer's account was implausible, as no wet towels were found anywhere in the house, including the dryer. Furthermore, there was no evidence of infidelity in Ryan and Sarah's marriage. The family was financially stable, and they never quarreled. Ryan's friends described him as a kind, helpful, and even-tempered person who never displayed anger. Additionally, Ryan stood to gain nothing from Sarah's death, as they did not have a life insurance policy. Before the third trial, Jennifer Cruz's credibility was called into question, and she was prevented from testifying as a witness. This was partly due to evidence of her past infidelities and petty theft convictions. Additionally, a phone call in which Ryan allegedly confessed to her was not corroborated. In January 2011, a new trial was held, prompted by the discovery of fresh evidence. The defense presented a medical opinion suggesting that Sarah's sudden loss of consciousness and subsequent drowning might have been caused by her underlying medical condition. Medical experts testified that Sarah's existing cardiac or neurological defects could have led to her losing consciousness, but the state's medical experts disputed these claims. Sarah's co-workers revealed that she often slept in her car before starting her shift at the dental clinic, and that she frequently suffered from allergies and stomach pains. On the day of her death, Sarah mentioned to her co-worker, Dr. Benjamin Mesmer, that she was experiencing a headache and stomach pain. Later that evening, a friend spoke with Sarah, observing that she looked extremely tired and complained of a headache and neck pain. Sarah's friends were aware of her ability to fall asleep easily in unexpected places, with one even speculating that she might have had narcolepsy. However, Sarah's mother testified that her daughter did not have any sleep disorders and was a healthy child who regularly underwent medical examinations, which showed she was in perfect health. The defense argued that Sarah's death was not caused by forced drowning because she didn't have any injuries to the small bones of her neck or defensive wounds on her arms and legs. Although the defense couldn't explain how Sarah died, an emergency medicine expert testified that every year, approximately 300,000 people die suddenly in the United States, and in about 33% of those cases, autopsy results are normal and show no underlying medical conditions. After deliberating for 12 hours, the jury found Ryan guilty of murder and sentenced him to 15 years in prison. Basing their decision on the fact that Sarah's body was not wet, Ryan's past history, and their belief that he had staged his 911 call. Ryan's family has passionately defended him, and the case, which dates back over 10 years, continues to unite like-minded individuals who hope to clear his name through DNA testing. While genetic material often plays a crucial role in resolving disputed charges and exonerations in cases involving unexplained deaths, what sets this case apart is the unusual request for the victim's DNA, rather than the person convicted. Unfortunately, a Warren County judge has already rejected Ryan Widmer's request to have the victim's DNA tested. Mike Allen, a former Hamilton prosecutor, noted that after listening to all 3 trials, he never found a clear motive, which is unusual in a murder case. However, the prosecutor is not required to prove motive, which makes this case even more peculiar. Ryan Widmer is awaiting a federal court decision on a motion for his release. He has been imprisoned for 14 years, and his first opportunity for release will be in July 2025 unless a federal judge rules in his favor. According to University of Cincinnati law professor Donald Custer, who also works with the Ohio Innocence Project, proving innocence is not enough to be exonerated. There must be evidence of a constitutional error in the judicial process. In 2025, Widmer will be eligible for parole, but his lawyers believe it's unlikely he'll be granted parole because the parole board tends to favor inmates who express remorse, whereas Widmer maintains his innocence. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Lindsay Burbeck. Sarah and her boyfriend Brandon arrived at her mother Lindsay's home for a scheduled tea party, but no one answered the door. This was unusual, so Sarah tried to contact her mother several times, but there was no response. She sent 2 text messages, "Where are you?" and a series of question marks, but still received no answer. After waiting outside for an hour, Sarah called her father, Tim Burbeck, to report that her mother was missing and not answering her phone. Tim picked up Sarah and Brandon and took them to his house around midnight. Sarah and Tim then returned to Lindsay's house with a spare set of keys, but found no signs of her or any indication of what might have happened. The house was in order, with no note of explanation. At 12:11 a.m. on August 13th, Tim reported Lindsay missing to the police, telling the dispatcher that his ex-wife was missing and could not be found. The disappearance of Lindsay shook the small suburban community to its core. In response, hundreds of people from the community banded together to search for her. The search party consisted of men and women, grandparents, dog walkers, teenagers with bicycles, and mothers with strollers. Despite most of them not knowing Lindsay personally, they were determined to find her. For 2 consecutive days, people gathered at Copus, fueled by hope of finding a crucial clue that could solve the mystery of her disappearance. After days of searching, Posting appeals on social media and putting up posters, the community's efforts continued unabated. However, as the days turned into weeks, it became increasingly clear that the search would be a challenging one. With each passing day, the chances of finding Lindsay alive grew slimmer. The detectives classified Lindsay as high risk, given that she had never gone missing before, and her family described her disappearance as uncharacteristic of her. Nevertheless, the search party refused to give up, driven by their determination to find Lindsay. The local community quickly sprang into action, printing and distributing thousands of posters featuring Lindsay's face throughout the neighborhood. A Facebook group dedicated to the search also rapidly gained popularity, reaching 10,000 members within hours of the police appeal being posted online. As a result, posters were soon plastered on every available surface, including lampposts, storefronts, and traffic lights, calling for the public's help in finding Lindsay. The police launched a comprehensive investigation into her disappearance from her home, involving specialist officers, dog handlers, firefighters, mountain rescue teams, volunteers, and the city's search and rescue team. They scoured the area around Copus and the surrounding countryside, using drones and helicopters to search popular walking and running routes. 4 days after Lindsay vanished, the police released CCTV footage showing her last known movements. The footage, captured at 4:10 p.m. on Burnley Road, showed her walking towards Copus, wearing a distinctive purple jacket, black leggings, and dark sneakers with white soles. As the search entered its 7th day, hopes of finding Lindsay alive were dwindling. Despite the extensive efforts, the police had yet to uncover any leads on her whereabouts. However, they stressed that there was no evidence to suggest she had fallen victim to a crime, leaving open the possibility that she might still be found alive. The search for Lindsay Burbeck continued into the evening, with hundreds of local residents joining the first mass public search of Copus after a social media appeal. The breakthrough came when a local resident's dog ran into a wooded area in Arrington Cemetery. The dog's strange behavior, sniffing and digging, caught its owner's attention. As the owner approached, they were met with a horrific sight, something soft and unidentifiable underfoot, accompanied by a terrible smell and swarms of flies. Peering closer, the owner saw a foot protruding from the ground, surrounded by earth and grass, wrapped in clear plastic bags. On August 24th, 12 days after Lindsay's disappearance, her body was discovered in the cemetery, buried in a shallow grave. The gruesome discovery marked the end of the search for Lindsay and the beginning of a murder investigation. Dr. Naomi Carter, a pathologist, performed an autopsy on Lindsay's body and concluded that the cause of death was a broken neck, inflicted with extreme force that crushed the larynx. The injury was likely caused by a foot or knee strike. Additionally, there were signs of an attempt to amputate Lindsay's right leg with a saw after her death, resulting in a deep laceration down to the bone. Despite the poor condition of the body, Dr. Carter found that Lindsay's injuries were catastrophic. However, she could not rule out the possibility of sexual activity on the day of Lindsay's disappearance due to the advanced state of decomposition. Before Lindsay's body was discovered, the police and members of the public had searched the area for several days without finding anything. During the search, community volunteers and a police dog handler reported seeing a blue wheelie garbage can abandoned in nearby bushes, but its significance was not yet understood. On August 20th, at 9 p.m., volunteers searching the cemetery found a dumpster with a dark stain on the outside, which they suspected might be blood. They took photos and called the police. 2 officers arrived, inspected the dumpster, and found a brown mark that they believed was dirt. Despite this, they decided the dumpster looked new and there was no evidence linking it to Lindsay's disappearance, so they left it in place. Around the same time, other important clues were discovered in the cemetery, but initially overlooked. On August 18th, local resident Christine Alderson found a bloody cloth on the grass while walking her dogs with her daughter. Although she thought the fresh red blood might belong to a homeless man who frequented the area, she still reported it. Another dog walker, Judith Bibby, found red clothing hanging on a barbed wire fence near the Cardinal Hill Trail, which was likely Lindsay's jacket. She also heard a child's voice, but no signs of struggle, yelling, or screaming. On August 25th, investigators returned to the crime scene and discovered a yellow-handled saw and a pair of green heavy-duty gloves near Lindsay's grave. The gloves had traces of blood on them, and upon forensic testing, the results showed that the gloves contained the perpetrator's DNA on the inside surfaces, while Lindsay's DNA was found on the outside surface of the left glove. Additionally, a pair of Lindsay's Skechers sneakers, which had been cut along the sole, were found in a blue plastic bag discarded in the cemetery. Further analysis of the evidence revealed that Lindsay's body had been wrapped in plastic sheeting, and beneath the sheeting, foliage and grass not native to the cemetery grounds were found. This led investigators to conclude that Lindsay's body had been moved from a different location before being buried in the cemetery. During the investigation, detectives remembered a blue trash can that had caught volunteers' attention. Reviewing CCTV footage, they made a surprising discovery: a young man pulling a blue wheelie garbage can in the Burley Road area multiple times. The same camera caught him visiting the cemetery 4 times. A suspect emerged, and footage of him carrying a trash can sparked a stir when broadcast on the news. The public helped identify the 16-year-old who surrendered to police the same day. Rocky Marciano Price, a local resident, was the boy in the videotape. He lived with his parents and 5 siblings in their family home of 3 decades on Winnie Hill Road in Arrington. Rocky had several mental health conditions, including autism, attention deficit disorder, and hyperactivity, which he had struggled with since childhood. His low IQ added to his learning and communication challenges. Rocky attended an alternative school in Barnoldswick a few days a week, where teachers described him as quiet and nonverbal. A 2015 psychologist's report found that Rocky had a limited understanding of his emotions and emotional well-being. He struggled to connect events and emotions. A 2016 report stated that Rocky was unresponsive to strangers and required constant supervision and care. His teachers, including Timothy Bradley, who taught at the school for 18 months, tried to engage Rocky in his education, but he preferred hands-on activities to academic subjects. Rocky rarely participated in conversations, even when discussing topics that interested him. Despite this, he was physically strong and tough for his age. He enjoyed activities like going to the gym, tending to the family's chickens, watching movies, and playing Xbox. Rocky seemed to exist in his own world, often unaware of his actions. Rocky Price randomly targeted Lindsay, killing her simply because she was lonely in the wrong place at the wrong time. On the first anniversary of the crime, August 12, 2020, Price went on trial and was unanimously found guilty by a jury after an 8-day retrial and 4 hours of deliberation. Although Price admitted to helping dispose of Lindsay's body, he claimed he had no role in her murder. He stated that a stranger approached him and asked for his help in burying the body in exchange for payment. However, evidence found at his home in Arrington contradicted his claim, including plastic bags identical to those found at Lindsay's grave. Additionally, a tracksuit and other clothing found at his home matched the outfit he wore on surveillance cameras on August 12th, 16th, and 17th, further implicating him in the crime. Defense attorney Mark Fenn Halls argued that Rocky Price, although responsible for burying the victim's body in the cemetery, was not her killer. Despite substantial evidence, Price pleaded not guilty to the crime, but admitted to moving the body. During the trial, Price, through his attorney, provided a statement explaining his movements between the crime scene in Copus and the cemetery where the body was found. However, the prosecutor maintained that Price acted alone. The motive behind the random attack on 47-year-old mother of 2, Lindsay, was never revealed, as the perpetrator did not know the victim. The judge sentenced Price to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 16 years. He will be eligible for release when the parole board deems him no longer a danger to society. The judge described the attack as swift and brutal, stating that Price clearly intended to kill a woman who was walking alone just minutes before Lindsay's incident. Meanwhile, another woman, Zoe Braithwaite, had a narrow escape from a similar attack. She encountered a suspicious teenager wearing a hood and walking alone on a parallel path. Her instincts kicked in, and she became wary of the individual, noticing that he looked out of place for a walk in the woods at that time of year. She quickened her pace and eventually ran away, likely saving her own life. The judge noted that if it hadn't been Zoe, it could have been someone else, and it was unfortunately Lindsay who fell victim. This was a calculated and intentional attack. After attempting to target one woman, he deliberately pursued another lone woman. His actions after the crime reveal his ability to think and plan. His teachers testified that he excelled in practical tasks, which he utilized to conceal the body. Rocky Price made 2 trips to Copus on the evening of August 12th. At 6:55 p.m., he was caught on CCTV cameras carrying a black backpack, possibly containing a saw to dismember Lindsay's body. Later, at 8:28 p.m., dog walker Anthony Doe witnessed him pulling out an empty trash can from the same location where his grandfather and other family members are buried. Without showing any signs of panic or excitement, Rocky Price executed a premeditated plan to dispose of Lindsay's body. He placed her in a blue trash can, dragged her to the cemetery, and spent over an hour burying her near the railroad line. He left behind a saw, gloves, and a trash can at the scene. The senseless and brutal murder of a stranger in broad daylight is deeply disturbing to society. The random nature of the attack and his prior stalking of another woman demonstrate that he poses a significant threat to the public. Rocky Marciano Price's name and photo were published for the first time after a judge lifted restrictions following his guilty verdict. Previously, his identity was kept secret due to his young age. Although the jury knew details about Price, they were not fully disclosed until after the verdict. Price's mental illness does not excuse his actions, as he knew killing was wrong. Lindsay's funeral was held at St. Margaret's Church in Hapton on September 20th, where over 200 mourners gathered to pay their respects. As police directed traffic on Manchester Road, Lindsay's coffin, adorned with flowers, was carried into the church. The outpouring of sympathy was evident in the dozens of bouquets from friends, family, and strangers alike left at the scene in her memory. According to her daughter Sarah, Lindsay was a woman full of optimism and positivity, always looking forward to the future. In fact, she had plans to visit Glasgow with her friend Sharon and was hoping to find love on the Match.com dating site. Tragically, her bright future was cut short on a sunny summer day. Rocky Price's fascination with death and mutilation may be a symptom of a deeper issue, such as autism. This neurodevelopmental disorder can cause difficulties with social interaction, motor skills, and repetitive behaviors, leading to withdrawal and isolation. While the exact cause is unclear, the consequences of Rocky's actions fit the severity of his crime, including burying Lindsay's mutilated body. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Carmen Thomas. Carmen Thomas was born on October 30th, 1987, in South Africa. When she was just 10 years old, her father passed away. This tragic loss had a profound impact on her family, and they decided to Whitby, United Kingdom, to live with relatives. However, they did not find the peace they were seeking, and after some time, they returned to South Africa. Despite the challenges she faced, Carmen decided to stay with her relatives when she turned 18. She later moved to London, where she completed her studies and earned a master's degree in marketing. Carmen had a strong and charismatic personality that drew people to her. She was a loyal friend and companion to many, but living in a big city like London came with a high price tag. To maintain a decent standard of living, Carmen had to work hard. During the day, she worked as a marketer in a store, and in her free time, she worked part-time in a gentleman's club. Although her choice of part-time job may seem unusual, Harmon was a girl with strong values and never engaged in unnecessary or undignified behavior, which earned her the respect of her clients. In this place, she met Brad Callahan, a charming and flamboyant man. Born in New Zealand in April 1978, Brad's parents separated when he was 9 years old, and he stayed with his mother. They later moved to Australia in 2001. After graduating from university with an engineering degree in the construction industry, Brad was offered a job as chief structural engineer for a large business complex in the UK. To boost his professional image, Brad hired a gentleman's agency and met Harmon, a beautiful, intelligent, and tall woman with dark hair and bright eyes. Although they started with a casual arrangement, Brad and Harmon continued to communicate informally, which eventually turned into a strong friendship, and later, love. Their romantic relationship blossomed quickly, and they soon moved in together. Their life was built on trust, care, and mutual support, making them look absolutely happy. Harmon became pregnant, and Brad thought it would be best for them to move back to New Zealand, where the air is clean and the pace of life is more relaxed. They returned to Auckland in March 2005. After their son Jack was born, he brought immense joy and happiness into their lives from day one. Harmon and Brad prioritized his safety and well-being, providing everything he needed for a happy childhood. To them, Jack was the center of their universe. However, with Jack's arrival, serious disagreements began to surface in their relationship. The first disagreements arose over how to raise their child. As a result, their relationship became rocky and unstable, ultimately leading to their breakup 3 years later. Despite the challenges, they shared joint custody of Jack and made a genuine effort to maintain a positive relationship for his sake. The breakup was difficult for both Harmon and Brad, but they put their differences aside to ensure little Jack's well-being. Harmon and Jack moved in with Colin, Harmon's half-brother, in Oakland, seeking emotional support and a sense of family. As time passed, Harmon regained her emotional balance and started rebuilding her life without Brad. In 2008, she decided to move to a house on a nearby street to Brad's so her young son could be closer to his father. Harmon, who had lost her own father at a young age, wanted to ensure her child would have a father figure in his life as much as possible. Harmon and Brad maintained a relationship for the sake of their son, but many people mistakenly thought they remained couple. In truth, they only communicated when necessary to support their child. As they went their separate ways, both Harmon and Brad concentrated on finding personal happiness. Brad continued his career as a construction engineer and eventually started a new relationship in May 2009, which led to an engagement. Harmon focused on raising their son while working at the gentleman's club, which upset Brad. He thought the mother of his child should not be involved in questionable activities. This disagreement created tension in their relationship, which worsened over time. Harmon issued ultimatums, but Brad ignored them. Despite this, Brad got married again and was expecting another child. His new financial responsibilities affected the alimony he paid Harmon for Jack's care. The money issue triggered a series of scandals. On March 19, 2010, neighbors called the police due to a domestic violence incident. Harmon was involved in a physical altercation with Brad during an argument and received a warning. Their relationship finally broke down. Even after separation, arguments continued. Each new question about Jack's care sparked aggression and conflict between the two former lovers. They couldn't agree on something as simple as which school Jack should attend, leading to more disputes. On June 29, 2010, Brad visited Harmon's house to finalize a written agreement for child support and discuss a new school for Jack. However, Harmon was unhappy with the document and refused to sign it. In a heated argument, she shouted that Jack was not Brad's son and told him to leave. Brad departed. 2 weeks passed without Brad contacting Harmon. Concerned for her safety, Brad reported Carmen Thomas missing to the police on July 13, 2010. The authorities took his report and launched an investigation. By analyzing video footage and interviewing neighbors, investigators were able to piece together a timeline of events leading up to Carmen's disappearance, uncovering crucial details that would aid in the search for her. On June 29th, a surveillance camera caught Carmen on tape at a nearby supermarket, not far from the house she shared with Jack. The police were alerted to the house when they noticed that there was no garbage can outside, which seemed unusual. Upon inspecting the house, they found traces of blood on the front door, washing machine, and shower. Forensic experts used luminol to detect blood evidence, which reacts with the iron in hemoglobin. The test revealed multiple patterns of bloodstains on the bathroom door and floor, confirming their suspicions. The landlady reported that on June 29th she heard loud screams, followed by prolonged crying and moaning. She went to Carmen's door, but no one answered. When she looked out the window, she saw a street trash can and an overturned drying rack on the ground. Alarmed, she called her husband. Before he arrived, Brad emerged from the house, holding dirty clothes. When he saw the landlady, he hastily explained that Carmen had undergone a medical procedure and had vomited blood. However, the landlady was suspicious, noting that Brad looked like he had just showered. Despite her doubts, she didn't call the police, as she had no reason to disbelieve Brad's story. The police investigation focused on Carmen's cell phone, which showed a steady stream of messages and calls. However, the tone and style of these communications didn't match Carmen's usual way of communicating. This sparked even more questions. Where did Carmen go for medical help, and why? Fortunately, the answers weren't far off. As the investigation continued, Carmen's car was discovered. In the back seat, her personal belongings, including luggage and clothes, were found. A closer look at the seized suitcase revealed bloodstains on some items. A note in the car revealed that Carmen owed money to her employer. A surprising discovery was made in the glove compartment, an envelope with Misty's name on it, containing $270. Police Inspector Mark Benefield suspected foul play after discovering bloodstains in Carmen's car. A search of the countryside southeast of Auckland was conducted, but Carmen's body was not found. The investigation continued, with detectives analyzing Carmen's and Brad's phone records. They made a surprising discovery. Both phones were in the same location throughout the search period, and Carmen's phone hadn't connected to a cell tower in Hamilton. A crucial piece of evidence was a missing trash can, which had vanished from its usual spot near the house on the day Carmen disappeared. A neighbor had seen it through her window. But why was it necessary for the trash can to be inside the house in the first place? The police investigated Brad's phone and financial records, which revealed some suspicious purchases on June 30th, including a meat cleaver, a large plastic container, and garbage bags. By examining Brad's daily routine, they found some unusual events that didn't fit his normal pattern. One day, he arrived at the construction site very early and spent a long time walking alone around the property. While this was unusual, it wasn't enough to raise concern among the workers who saw him. As the evidence mounted, including Carmen's phone and Brad's questionable purchases, he went from being a victim to a suspect. The police believed that Brad had killed Carmen by hitting her on the head multiple times and then hiding her body. On September 21st, Brad was arrested and charged with Carmen's murder and attempting to modify the course of justice. He pleaded not guilty and was scheduled for trial. In a surprising coincidence, Brad's second son was born to his new partner while he was in custody, causing a wave of emotion and resentment in the young father. 9 days after his arrest, Brad broke down and revealed to investigators where he had buried Carmen's body. Brad concocted a plan to make it seem like Carmen had left for Hamilton and never came back. Confident in his scheme, he was convinced he'd pulled it off. However, life had other plans. Under interrogation, Brad recounted the events of that fateful day. It began with a heated argument, which ended with Harmon kicking Brad out of the house and claiming Jack wasn't his son. Brad left, but 5 minutes later, he returned and struck Harmon on the head with a baseball bat, rendering her unconscious. The impact was severe, causing blood to gush from the wound and stain the floor bright red, accompanied by labored breathing. Standing over Harmon's lifeless body, Brad's eyes blazed with a wild, unhinged expression. He realized the gravity of his actions, but his anger and resentment towards Harmon's words clouded his judgment. In a fit of rage, he unleashed several more punches. Although aware of the irreparable consequences, his obsessive fury consumed him. Fleeting memories of happier times flashed before his eyes, but they were now forever lost. Brad knew his life would never be the same after that devastating moment, but he felt no remorse as he had eliminated his primary problem, and Jack was now exclusively his. After regaining consciousness, Brad took a shower and discreetly left Harmon's house. In the subsequent days, he took swift action to dispose of Harmon's body and conceal the evidence of the crime. He contacted his friend and arranged to meet him outside a supermarket, asking him to purchase 3 black garbage bags, kerosene, and cleaning supplies. Brad waited outside the store, trying to avoid raising suspicions. Once his friend had made the purchase, Brad returned to the apartment and began the cleanup process. He meticulously wiped away the blood spatter and then placed the body in a garbage bag, which he later discarded in a trash can. After Harmon's murdered, the defendant cut her body into 8 pieces to dispose of it. He severed her legs at the hip joints, then cut each leg into 2 pieces at the knee. He also severed her arms and head from her torso. On July 3rd, he confided in a friend at a boat ramp in Oahu Bay, Oakland, telling him that he had killed Harmon during an argument and needed help to get rid of the body. However, the friend refused to lend him a boat, and the attempt to dump the remains at sea failed. Over the next few days, the defendant drove to Wyrie Ridge in West Auckland and buried the body parts in a shallow grave. On July 7th, he drove Harmon's car to Hamilton and abandoned it in a hotel parking lot, leaving behind a suitcase of clothes and other personal belongings to make it seem like she had intentionally left. However, in his hurry, he failed to notice that the suitcase also contained bloody clothes. After disposing of the car, Brad attempted to create the illusion that Harmon was still alive by sending text messages from her cell phone to her friends. He pretended to be Harmon, claiming she was unwell and had been in poor health for days. However, Brad's plan ultimately failed. On October 1st, the police searched the burial site indicated by Brad and discovered Harmon's body. Her remains were found in plastic containers in a makeshift grave on Wyrie Ridge, and an autopsy revealed that she had died from multiple head injuries, including a fatal blow that caused a compressed skull fracture. After forensic examinations, Harmon's body was returned to her family for burial. A private funeral was held at Green Lane Christian Center on October 13th to honor Harmon, a young mother known for her cheerful, kind, and successful nature. Her son, little Jack, was only able to hug and kiss her white casket, having waited and hoped to see and hug his mother. The first court hearing for Harmon's case took place on February 8, 2011. Judge Venning found the crime to be unintentional, taking into account Brad's claim that he acted in a fit of rage. While Judge Venning acknowledged this, he was less lenient when it came to Brad's attempted cover-up. On May 26, 2011, Brad Callahan was charged with attempting to obstruct justice. According to the police investigation, on July 29, 2010, Callahan fatally struck Harmon Thomas multiple times in the head. He then sent a text message to a friend asking for 3 garbage bags and a bottle of kerosene. Subsequently, Callahan dismembered Harmon's body into 8 pieces to dispose of it. On November 25, 2011, a retrial was held, and police officers involved in the case filled the Auckland High Court. Unexpectedly, Brad Callahan pleaded guilty to 2 charges: murder and attempting to obstruct justice following Harmon's death. This was a reversal of his previous denial of guilt. The judge described Callahan's actions as one of the most serious cases of attempting to pervert the course of justice, stating it was as serious as it gets. The judge also characterized the murder of Carmen Thomas as brutal, but not severe enough to warrant the harshest sentencing laws. A 33-year-old man, Brad Callahan, was sentenced to life in prison for murdering Carmen Thomas in Auckland High Court. The court was packed with Carmen's friends and family, including her parents, who had traveled from South Africa. Judge Venning condemned Callahan's attempts to cover his tracks, describing them as insufficient to bring him to justice. Callahan will serve his life sentence and 6 years for attempting to pervert the course of justice concurrently. Detective Inspector Mark Benefield stated that Callahan's actions had a devastating impact on 2 families and that he had effectively passed judgment on himself. Callahan's supporters left the court without commenting. Carmen's family expressed their grief and anger over her tragic loss, grateful that Callahan will be imprisoned for a long time to reflect on the harm he caused. Her mother, Teresa Scott, was left completely devastated by the incident. Detective Mark Benefield explained that the 10-week investigation into Carmen's disappearance involved hundreds of hours of police work. Early on, they suspected she was murdered and carefully gathered evidence following proper legal procedures. Benefield praised the cooperation with the defendant's employer and ongoing efforts to search the construction site for more evidence. He didn't rule out further arrests or charges related to Carmen's death. The Thomas family is devastated, saying they'll never forgive Brad for his actions. However, Carmen's stepfather, Wayne Callahan, and his attorney, Stuart Grieve, acknowledged Brad's acceptance of responsibility and won't challenge the sentence. The case raises concerns about potential biases against Carmen due to her profession, but emphasizes that the victim is not to blame and Brad's actions were inexcusable. The case has garnered significant media attention due to its rarity in New Zealand. The impact on Carmen's young son, Jack, who now lives under an assumed name, is also discussed, with the need to protect him from learning the truth about his mother's fate. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Brianna Marie Schneller. Brianna was a vibrant and diligent young woman who excelled academically as the top student at Everest High School in Washington. She had a passion for Mexican cuisine, music, and dancing, and enjoyed thrilling activities like roller coasters. Her parents, Craig and Lori Schneller, described her as an outstanding individual. Brianna had achieved a remarkable feat by being the only student from Wisconsin to qualify for a prestigious national competition in professional and technical fields. She was set to present her project in Tennessee that summer. Her long-term goal was to pursue higher education in restaurant management and eventually start her own business in the food industry. To gain experience and skills, she worked part-time at the El Michal restaurant in Rib Mountain. Colleagues, friends, and customers alike appreciated Brianna's kind and responsive nature. With her graduation and upcoming wedding to her fiancé, 22-year-old Sebastian Ramirez, just around the corner, the future looked bright for this ambitious and talented Brianna. At first, Brianna's parents disapproved of her relationship with Sebastian due to their age difference and their belief that she was growing up too fast. However, after getting to know Sebastian better, they came to trust him and saw that he genuinely loved Brianna and was committed to their future together. The couple eventually moved in together, renting an apartment on 12th Avenue in Wa, along with Sebastian's 19-year-old brother, Hugo. From the outside, it seemed like the three of them got along well and lived harmoniously, with many people envying their friendship. Sebastian and his brother also supported Brianna's interests and worked with her at a local restaurant called El Tequila Salsa. One ordinary workday changed everything for Sebastian and Brianna. No one anticipated the horrific tragedy that would soon unfold, shattering their plans and dreams. On the morning of May 2, 2009, Sebastian was the first to wake up, choosing not to disturb Brianna, who was sleeping peacefully beside him. Since it was her day off from school, she didn't need to rush. While Sebastian was in the shower, Brianna woke up and they exchanged sweet greetings, discussing their plans for the day. Meanwhile, Sebastian tried to rouse his younger brother, Hugo, who had stumbled in late the night before after overindulging at a party. After getting ready, Sebastian headed to work, just a 5 to 10 minute walk away. Hugo followed soon after, leaving Brianna alone at home, where she chatted with her mother and attended to her tasks. Hugo felt restless and had a headache, probably from drinking too much the night before. He was struggling to focus and regretted overindulging. To get some rest, he decided to swap lunch breaks with a colleague and headed home at 1:20 p.m. When he entered the apartment, everything seemed normal at first. However, as he walked further, he noticed that his brother's and girlfriend's room was in disarray. What caught his attention was Brianna lying on the floor. Hugo rushed to her and asked what had happened, but she didn't respond. At first, he didn't notice the blood. When he moved the towel that had been covering her face, he let out a scream. Brianna was unrecognizably disfigured. Hugo grabbed the phone to call the emergency services, but his hands were shaking and his mind was foggy. Despite his distress, he knew he had to act. He ran to his neighbor's apartment, a floor below, through tears. Young Ramirez tried to explain what had happened and asked her to call for help. On a Saturday afternoon, emergency services received a call despite it being a day of rest. A woman called on behalf of her neighbor, requesting medical help for Brianna, who lay severely injured on the floor with cuts and a disfigured face, showing no signs of life. Police and paramedics were immediately dispatched. When they arrived at the apartment building, the parking lot was crowded, but one individual, Hugo Ramirez, stood out and approached them. He led the officers to the apartment, where he, barely able to speak, pointed out the shocking scene before them. At the center of it all lay Brianna, her body bearing deep stab wounds on her chest, neck, and wrist. The officers asked him to leave the room while forensic specialists began their examination of the crime scene. The crime scene suggested the victim had been lying there for a while, with dried blood scattered everywhere. Defensive cuts on her arms showed she tried to fight back, but was overpowered. The forensic team found key evidence: a bloody, broken iron on the floor, 2 knives in the sink, one with a missing tip, blood on the soap, and a telling shoe print on the carpet. These details hinted at the brutal attack. No signs of forced entry suggested Brianna knew her attacker or they had a way in without breaking in. Scattered bills, accumulated from work, totaled a substantial sum, but nothing seemed missing. The broken knife tip in her body indicated a violent attack, not robbery. The amount of force needed to break the knife hinted at a strong attacker. Police needed to speak with Brianna's relatives and friends to gather information and convey the devastating news. Craig and Laura Schneller waited anxiously at the police station, unable to reach their daughter after hearing of a tragedy at her home. Their worry turned to dread as officers delivered devastating news, their worst fears confirmed. The loss shattered their lives, dividing their world into before and after. Authorities showed them identification photos, but only those revealing part of her face due to extensive injuries. The confirmation was almost too much to bear. After consulting with the psychologist, Craig and Lori, Brianna's parents, were willing to cooperate with the investigation to help catch the person responsible. They provided as much information as possible about their daughter's life, emphasizing that she had no known enemies or anyone who might hold a grudge against her. Lori was the last person Brianna had communicated with that morning, having messaged her around 10 a.m. to let her know she had taken Brianna's car to the auto repair shop. Brianna responded to the message, which meant the incident occurred after she spoke with her mother and before Hugo arrived, establishing a timeline for the events. The police launched a thorough investigation, starting by interviewing the Rodriguez brothers, Sebastian and Hugo, separately. Sebastian, Brianna's fiancé, reported that he woke up at 9:15 a.m., had a brief conversation with Brianna while getting ready for work, and then woke his brother up. By 10:15 a.m., he was already at the restaurant. He learned about Brianna's death after receiving a phone call. Hugo's account matched his brother's, stating he left the house about 10 to 15 minutes after Sebastian and returned home at 1:20 p.m. because he was feeling unwell and wanted to rest. However, his illness and fatigue disappeared when he discovered Brianna's body. After that, he was in shock, unable to think clearly or react properly, so he ran to a neighbor for help. The Ramirez brothers' statements seemed believable, and their distress appeared genuine. However, the police knew that convincing performances were not enough. They needed concrete evidence to prove their innocence. It was possible that one brother was the killer, and the other was covering for him. To explore this possibility, detectives asked the brothers about their relationships with each other. Sebastian expressed his love for Brianna and his excitement about their upcoming wedding. Hugo was questioned about any potential grudges against his brother's girlfriend, or if they had argued, but he denied any issues. He also clarified that, despite finding Brianna attractive, he had no romantic intentions towards her because he valued his good relationship with his brother and would never interfere with Sebastian's happiness. Hugo considered Brianna like a sister. The police interrogated the brothers for hours, but neither aroused any suspicion. After taking DNA samples, they were allowed to return home. Detectives verified the brothers' alibis by interviewing El Tequila Salsa restaurant employees and reviewing surveillance footage. The evidence confirmed their accounts, ruling out a domestic crime. The new focus became identifying Brianna's killer. Was a predator watching her, striking when she was alone? The investigation continued. The autopsy results confirmed the police's initial suspicions. Brianna was hit on the head with a blunt object, then her throat was slit and she suffered multiple stab wounds. The intense attack left numerous, potentially fatal wounds. Despite the brutality, Brianna fought back fiercely, as evidenced by foreign DNA under her fingernails. Initial claims that nothing was missing proved false. Brianna's phone was gone, and Sebastian reported it to detectives. The phone's active signal led police to a nearby restaurant where Sebastian and Hugo worked. The investigation became even more complicated when the brothers provided a solid alibi, and one of them reported the missing phone, which seemed suspicious given the coincidences. Detectives rushed to the location indicated, but instead of a crime scene, they found themselves in the parking lot of a shopping center with a restaurant. After a brief search, they found a plastic takeout bag in a trash bin with the logo of El Tequila Salsa. Inside the bag, they discovered the girl's phone, 2 mismatched gloves, and a pair of women's underwear. One of the gloves was stained with blood. This unexpected discovery changed the direction of the investigation, suggesting that the crime might have been motivated by intimate reasons and involved a predator. The bag and its contents were sent to the laboratory to be analyzed for potential fingerprints or DNA evidence from the perpetrator. When shown a photo of the items, Sebastian identified the underwear as belonging to his girlfriend. The investigation continued, with multiple interrogations of the restaurant staff, and on May 5th, everyone was asked to provide DNA samples and undergo medical examinations to check for scratches or injuries. The police also thoroughly reviewed both internal and external surveillance footage from the restaurant and neighboring establishments. The police faced a significant challenge in identifying who had discarded the bag. Their initial attention focused on a kitchen worker who arrived late to work around the time Brianna's lifeless body was discovered. However, he had a solid alibi, as a traffic stop for speeding en route to the restaurant supported his claim. Fortunately, reviewing surveillance footage greatly aided the investigation. Raul Ponceroa, a 24-year-old kitchen manager, became a person of interest. He left the building at 10:18 a.m. wearing a brown hoodie, but returned without it at 10:53 a.m. Raul claimed he went to pick up friend Luciano, a dishwasher who lived in the same building as the victims. Upon further inquiry, Raul claimed the errand took about 20 minutes, but a discrepancy remained. What happened during the remaining 15 minutes? Raul refused to provide an explanation, while Luciano corroborated Raul's story, stating they didn't stop anywhere on their way to work. Nevertheless, the 15-minute gap continued to trouble detectives, and Raul's behavior raised suspicions, particularly given the unexplained cuts on his hands, which he attributed to working with knives. Raul seemed suspicious, but there wasn't enough evidence to hold him. However, by May 9th, investigators had established a crucial timeline. On May 2nd at 1:16 p.m., a single employee left the back door of El Tequila Salsa, and at the same time, only one person approached the trash bins. It didn't take long to identify the suspect, and surprisingly, it wasn't Sebastian or Hugo Ramirez, as initially suspected, but Raul Ponceroa, the manager. Authorities searched Raul's home, finding intriguing personal items: women's underwear, adult videos, a brown hoodie, and a glove like one found in a trash bin. They sent his DNA for comparison with the plastic bag samples and analyzed a female hair strand on his clothing. With evidence pointing to Brianna, they awaited test results. Once confirmed, Raul was arrested for suspected first-degree murder. Sebastian was stunned, wondering what drove Raul to hurt Brianna, someone they barely knew. Raul had always seemed kind and cheerful, the last person Sebastian suspected of harming anyone. The trial of Raul Ponrocha took place in 2011, following a lengthy investigation. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Raul denied any involvement in the crime and refused to admit guilt. However, the prosecution presented compelling proof, including the presence of Raul's DNA on all key pieces of evidence, such as the iron, knives, plastic bag, and its contents, as well as under Brianna's fingernails. Furthermore, a shoe print found at the crime scene matched the size and pattern of Raul's shoes. Raul arrived at work at 9 a.m. on May 2, 2009, and on his way to the restaurant, he passed the victim's house, which had long fascinated him. Seeing no car, he assumed she was out and took the opportunity to enter her apartment. Raul had a peculiar habit of collecting women's underwear, which was later found under his mattress. After the Rodriguez brothers arrived, Raul left the restaurant, claiming to pick up lunch. Instead, he entered the victim's apartment, easily unlocking the door. He rummaged through her belongings in her room, and when she caught him off guard, he struck her with an iron and slashed her throat with a knife, inflicting multiple injuries. The investigation found that the killer, Raul, took pleasure in the murder, inflicting multiple wounds with different knives. He then tried to cover his tracks, washing his hands and removing his jacket before resuming work as usual. During a lunch break, he disposed of the evidence in a trash bin, unaware he was caught on the kitchen's video recordings. Raul claimed to have met Brianna but didn't kill her, instead implicating a former restaurant employee, Sergio, who he saw at her house on the day of her death. However, Sergio had an alibi, having left the country weeks prior to care for his ill father in Mexico. He testified at the trial, refuting Raul's accusation and disproving any involvement in the crime. Raul's attempt to shift blame failed. The defendant showed no remorse for falsely accusing an innocent person of a heinous crime during the trial. Brianna's relatives, including Sebastian and Hugo, were present and struggled to contain their emotions. Raul Ponrocha was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. He is currently serving his sentence in Wisconsin. Brianna's father stated that her case became personal for many involved, cherishing memories of her. He confessed that her death broke his heart and he lost faith. It is hoped that Sebastian has closed this tragic chapter and moved forward. His brother Hugo later appeared on a TV show discussing their ordeal. Raul's actions were fatal for Brianna, devastating her family's hearts. If he hadn't tried to cover up his tracks, he might have gotten away with clumsy apologies, possibly leading to a confrontation with the Rodriguez brothers. It's unlikely Brianna would have reported him to the police, and even then, the incident could have been resolved with minimal harm. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Maricela Botella Valadez. Maricela Botella Valadez was born in 1997 in Seattle, Washington. She was the eldest of 2 children in a family of Latin American descent. People described her as a sweet, sociable young woman who always had many friends, performed well in school, and after graduating, became a student at a prestigious university. Furthermore, Maricela was considered truly beautiful, petite, slim, with big brown eyes, luxurious hair, and a flawless figure. On Saturday, October 3, 2020, she flew to Dallas to meet up with old friends. However, by Monday morning, she planned to return. Her brother was supposed to meet her at the airport on October 5th, after which they would head to the university together. But the plane arrived without her. The search for her began when her brother realized she was not among the passengers from the flight. Concerned, he tried to call her, but her phone was turned off. He then called their parents to inform them about the situation. Since Maricela was a serious and responsible young woman, her disappearance without warning and not showing up for university classes was out of character. The family started calling her friends in Dallas, trying to find out where she might have gone and where she was last seen. It turned out that the night before, she had been partying at one of the city's most popular clubs, where she met a black man named Chuck. The pair danced, enjoyed themselves, and had alcoholic drinks, after which they disappeared together. Maricela was not seen again, and her phone went unanswered. The information seriously alarmed and frightened her parents, so they immediately decided to report her disappearance to the police. It turned out that the young woman had indeed bought tickets for a flight to Seattle, but for some reason she had not boarded the plane. No one had seen her since that night, and no one knew where she might be. The officers reviewed external surveillance camera footage, which showed she leaving with a young man whose face was unclear. The footage suggested she was walking with him voluntarily. They got into a black Audi and drove away in an unknown direction. Days passed without contact or signs of life from her. She hadn't logged into her social media accounts, and there were no transactions on her bank cards. The police needed to identify the mysterious man she was with to determine where to look for her. One of her friends mentioned that her companion might be named Chuck, but that information was insufficient. Fortunately, street camera footage helped investigators determine the direction the car traveled. The pair was also caught on camera at a supermarket, where they appeared happy and affectionate. The young woman picked out drinks and candies, and the young man paid using a card in the name of Charles Beltran. It was discovered that Beltran, a 31-year-old musician, had a criminal past, including 2 incarcerations for robbery and armed assault. He had recently been released on parole and was preparing to release his own music album. Investigators tracked down his address and found that her phone had been active at that location on the night she disappeared. When police visited the address with an FBI agent, they found the house empty, but managed to contact the owner, Lisa Dyke, by phone. She claimed Charles Beltran had been renting a room from her, but moved out 2 weeks prior, and she had no knowledge of his whereabouts. With the sole suspect unlocated, law enforcement obtained a warrant to search the house. What they found was alarming and frightening. The house was in disarray, with dirty dishes, moldy food, and trash scattered everywhere. It seemed as though the occupants had left in a hurry, taking only essentials. Notably, numerous empty bottles of cleaning and detergent products were found, with traces on the floors and carpets, indicating a thorough cleaning had taken place. In one of the upstairs rooms, a black statue of death, resembling the Mexican cult of Santa Muerte, was set up as an altar with wax candles, dried flowers, and 2 metal bowls. A thorough examination of the house revealed wiped blood stains in one of the bedrooms, the bathroom, and the hallway. The bedroom with the blood-soaked carpet belonged to Charles Beltran. It was clear that a violent crime had taken place, but the identity of the victim was unknown. The occupants had hastily cleaned up and fled, but traces of blood remained, having seeped into the carpet, under the baseboards, and onto the wallpaper and furniture. DNA experts compared the found bloodstains to Maricella's DNA, dispelling any doubts that the blood belonged to her. The house was sealed as a crime scene, and the task was to find the main suspect. However, Charles had fled, and the owner had already put the house up for sale. To learn more, the police decided to investigate the backgrounds of everyone who had recently lived in the house. Neighbors revealed that 3 people lived in the house: 57-year-old Lisa Dyke, 48-year-old Nina Morano, and 31-year-old Charles Beltran. However, the nature of their relationships and their sudden disappearance remained unclear. It was necessary to investigate each individual's background and find and interrogate them as soon as possible. The house owner, Lisa Dyke, was a commanding, ambitious, and contentious woman who had been married 3 times and received a substantial inheritance after becoming a widow. She had no financial necessity to rent a room to Charles, suggesting she had some other interest in him. Charles, or Chuck, Beltran dreamed of making it big in the music scene, but he lacked money and connections, and his criminal past hindered him. Lisa Dyke helped him by moving him into her house, setting up a small recording studio, and even sponsoring the filming of several music videos for him. She also bought him a car, paid for his entertainment, and fashionable clothes, claiming their relationship was strictly business and that she saw great potential in the talented young man. About Nina Morano, she and Lisa had been in an intimate relationship for a long time and had officially legalized their union by getting married several months ago. A close friend revealed that Lisa had an intimate relationship with Charles, which drove her insane with jealousy. Charles also had a vested interest in living with a wealthy older lover who solved all his financial problems and helped him build a music career. Charles frequently engaged in brief, casual relationships with young women, which fueled Lisa's intense jealousy. However, what role did Nina Morano play in the disappearance of Maricela, and how did she fit into Charles's love triangle? According to a close friend, Lisa's spouse, Charles, was part of this unusual love triangle with Nina, and he insisted that his young lovers sleep with both women. After their wedding, both women took Charles's last name, and the household consisted of Charles, Lisa, and Nina Beltran. The investigation into Maricela's disappearance revealed that no one had been seen at the house where her blood was found, and Lisa was only contacted once. She claimed to be in another state and then ceased responding to calls. The whereabouts of Nina and Charles, the main suspect, were also unknown. Mobile phone signals indicated that on the night of October 5th, all 4 individuals, including Maricela, were at the house. By early morning, their device signals had moved to a suburban area of Dallas, where they eventually disappeared. A few days later, Lisa responded from her second work phone, which also became unreachable. Using geolocation data from the mobile devices, the route the group took that night was traced, and the stops they made were identified. It was presumed that they might have disposed of Maricela's body in that area, defining a broad search radius. However, the search operation was slow and eventually halted due to the vast and difficult-to-navigate area. In March 2021, a local hunter stumbled upon a human skull in the woods, which was later identified as Maricela's through dental records. Although the advanced state of decomposition and animal damage made it impossible to determine the exact cause of death, characteristic marks on the bones suggested knife wounds. The authorities soon tracked down Lisa, who had moved to Florida with Nina and rented a house in Miami. However, only Nina was apprehended, while Charles went into hiding. Although he occasionally communicated with former girlfriends, he left no traces of his whereabouts. Nina, now incarcerated, refused to provide any information, claiming she knew nothing about Maricela's fate. Meanwhile, Lisa attempted to hire a good lawyer for her spouse using her connections. It emerged that Nina had put her house in South Carolina up for sale, indicating that she needed the money to continue hiding or leave the country. A month after her disappearance, authorities found and arrested Lisa, and both women were taken back to Dallas. During initial questioning, they refused to cooperate and each was held on a $500,000 bond. They managed to post bail and were released under house arrest, wearing tracking bracelets to monitor their movements. However, they made a daring escape attempt in August of that year. Meanwhile, the police tracked Charles to Utah, where he was hiding at the home of one of his ex-girlfriends. She was raising a 5-year-old son fathered by Beltran and was thrilled to see him, not questioning his sudden return. Charles initially refused to testify or cooperate with the police, hoping his wealthy lover would use her money and connections to hire a good lawyer and help him avoid prison. However, the situation changed drastically on Christmas Eve 2012. The tracking bracelets worn by Lisa and Nina suddenly went offline due to holiday chaos, and it took until the next day for the police to arrive at their location. By then, the suspects were gone. It turned out they had been planning their escape for months and had already crossed the border into Mexico. From there, they flew to South Korea, where their trail was lost in Cambodia. The FBI joined the investigation, working with Cambodian police and immigration services to track down the fugitives. She came under law enforcement's radar after withdrawing a large sum of money from an ATM. They tried to pay in cash everywhere to avoid revealing their whereabouts, but ATM cameras helped identify them, and a neighboring building's camera captured the license plate number of the car they arrived in. This information led the police to the driver, who took them to the house rented by the extravagant foreigners. They were arrested and extradited to the U.S. in February 2022, where they were denied bail and sent directly to jail. Charles, realizing his lover was not going to save him from prison, began to cooperate with the investigation and provided information. His account of the events of that dreadful night horrified many. Charles confessed that he had been in an intimate relationship with the homeowner, Lisa, and her spouse, and that he engaged in these relationships for money and to advance his music career. He had no warm feelings towards her and often had affairs with young and attractive women, which he never hid. While Lisa sometimes became wildly jealous, Na was indifferent to his actions. On the fateful night of October 5, 2020, Charles met Maricela at a nightclub. After spending hours drinking and dancing, he invited her over, and she agreed. When they arrived at his place late at night, Na and Lisa were already asleep. Charles took Maricela to his room, where they engaged in intimate activities and later fell asleep. Charles claimed he was awakened by a noise and was disoriented, still intoxicated. When he turned on the light, he saw a horrific scene. Maricela's body had slid to the floor next to the bed, and she had bled out. Na entered the room, and they stood there for a few minutes, not trying to help the victim. When Charles regained his composure, he realized the crime might be pinned on him due to his criminal record, and his influential lovers could escape punishment. So, he agreed to help dispose of the body and cover up the crime. According to Lisa's lawyer, she had no motive to attack and kill Maricela. Lisa claimed her relationship with Charles was strictly business, and she viewed his promising music career as a good investment. She wasn't concerned about who he slept with or flirted with. However, Lisa did say that Charles was hot-tempered and cruel, especially when drunk. She claimed that on the night of the murder, Charles brought a new girl from the club, and an argument erupted. Charles grabbed a knife, and despite Lisa and Na's attempts to intervene, Maricela was killed. They helped dispose of the body and clean up the scene under the threat of becoming Charles's next victims. Lisa's friend testified that Lisa was obsessed with Charles and had repeatedly confessed to wanting to eliminate any girl who got close to him. The friend also mentioned an odd statue of Santa Muerte at Lisa's house, which Lisa claimed was for black magic to ensure Charles' devotion to her. However, it seemed the ritual failed, and Lisa resorted to using a knife. Another witness, a real estate agent, testified that Lisa and Na were eager to sell several properties they owned as quickly as possible, including their Dallas home, which was the site of the alleged crime. The court took into account Charles's full confession and cooperation with the investigation. Lisa Dyke Beltran was found guilty of the brutal crime against Maricela, concealing evidence and attempting to flee. She was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Charles Beltran and Nina Morin fully admitted their guilt and agreed to cooperate with the investigation. They were found guilty of concealing evidence, and Nina was sentenced to 7 years in prison, with the possibility of release in 3 years due to good behavior. Charles, previously convicted on multiple occasions, was sentenced to 12 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving 8 years.